A 7-year-old girl's whisper, "Daddy, please help her," forces a retired Navy SEAL to make an impossible choice: protect his daughter or save a stranger being dragged into a van by armed men. What happens in the next 90 seconds will shatter his quiet civilian life forever. By tomorrow morning, a Navy admiral will be standing at his door with a revelation that changes everything. This is the true story of Ethan Ward, a father who thought he'd left the battlefield behind, only to discover that some fights find you when you least expect them. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this story travels. The Arizona sun beat down on the asphalt parking lot with that particular intensity that makes the air shimmer and dance above parked cars. Ethan Ward pushed the shopping cart with one hand while his 7-year-old daughter Maya skipped alongside him, her pink backpack bouncing with each step. It was a Saturday afternoon like any other: errands, groceries, the mundane rhythm of civilian life that Ethan had fought hard to embrace after leaving the Navy. "Daddy, can we get ice cream on the way home?" Maya asked, her hazel eyes bright with hope. Ethan smiled down at her, his weathered face softening in a way that only she could manage. "We'll see, sweetheart. Let's get this stuff loaded up first." The parking lot of the Northgate Shopping Center was moderately full, typical for a weekend. Soccer moms loaded minivans. Teenagers clustered near the entrance, absorbed in their phones. An elderly couple slowly made their way toward the supermarket entrance, the old man carefully holding his wife's elbow. Normal. Safe. Predictable. Everything Ethan had wanted after 12 years in naval special warfare. He clicked the key fob and his Ford F-150's lights flashed in response, parked 3 rows over. Maya immediately broke into a run toward the truck, her sneakers slapping against the hot pavement. "Walk, Maya," Ethan called out, his voice carrying that automatic authority that never quite left, no matter how many years passed. "Stay where I can see you." She slowed obediently, turning to flash him a grin before continuing at a more measured pace. Ethan followed, the cart's wheels rattling over the uneven asphalt. His eyes automatically scanned the area, a habit so ingrained it had become unconscious. Exit points. Unusual vehicles. People whose body language didn't match their surroundings. Old habits didn't die. They just went quiet, waiting. That's when he heard it. A scream, sharp, desperate, female, cutting through the ambient noise of the parking lot like a knife. Ethan's body responded before his mind fully processed the sound. The shopping cart stopped. His hand went instinctively to his right hip, finding only empty belt where a sidearm used to rest. His head turned toward the source of the sound, eyes narrowing, every sense suddenly razor-sharp. 70 yards away, near a white panel van parked in the shadow between the main building and a dumpster enclosure, 3 men were forcing a young woman toward the van's open side door. She was fighting, kicking, twisting, trying to break free, but they had her arms pinned. One of the men, heavy-set with a shaved head, clamped a meaty hand over her mouth, muffling another scream. "Daddy?" Maya's voice was small, uncertain. Ethan's jaw tightened. His pulse, already elevated, began that familiar descent into combat-ready calm. Heart rate dropping, vision sharpening, time beginning to stretch. The woman was maybe 25, wearing business-casual clothes, her purse spilling onto the ground as she struggled. The men were coordinated, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this before. This wasn't a mugging. This was an abduction. In the 3 seconds it took Ethan to process the scene, 1,000 calculations ran through his mind. Distance, number of hostiles, probable weapons, tactical approach. His muscle memory was already plotting movements, identifying weak points in their formation. Then reality crashed back in. Maya. His daughter was standing 15 feet away, watching him with those trusting eyes that believed her father could fix anything. Those same eyes that still occasionally woke him at 2 a.m. from nightmares about losing her mother to cancer 3 years ago. Those eyes that represented everything he'd fought to protect, everything he'd left the teams to preserve. "Daddy, what's happening?" Maya whispered, her small hand reaching for his. Ethan grabbed her hand, pulling her close. "It's okay, baby. Just stay right here." But it wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. The woman's muffled screams were getting weaker. In another 10 seconds, she'd be in that van. In another 20, the van would be gone. Statistics flooded his mind, statistics he'd learned during anti-trafficking briefings in the Navy. First 24 hours were critical. After that, victims often disappeared into networks so vast and dark that even federal task forces struggled to find them. Someone nearby had to have called 911. Surely. In a parking lot this full, someone had to be... Ethan looked around. A few people were staring, mouths open, phones out. But they were recording, not calling. Others were hurrying away, desperate not to get involved. The elderly couple had disappeared inside. The teenagers were backing toward the store entrance, wide-eyed but paralyzed. No one was helping. "Get in the damn van," one of the men snarled. He was tall, wiry, wearing a dark jacket despite the heat. His hand flashed, and afternoon sunlight glinted off steel. A knife, 4-inch blade, held low and professional. Ethan's stomach dropped. The calculation changed entirely. This wasn't just abduction. This was armed abduction. Knife meant willingness to use lethal force. Knife meant these men would rather kill the woman than let her go if they felt cornered. His training screamed at him. Assess, adapt, act. Establish tactical superiority. Neutralize threats in order of lethality. His instinct as a father screamed louder. Run! Get Maya away from here. Protect your daughter. Nothing else matters. The internal war lasted maybe 2 seconds. 2 seconds during which Ethan Ward stood frozen between two versions of himself. The operator he'd been for over a decade and the single father he'd become. Maya's hand tightened in his. She was looking up at him with an expression he'd never seen before, something between fear and expectation. And then she said 4 words that shattered his paralysis. "Daddy, please help her." The simple clarity of a child's morality. No complications, no risk assessment, no tactical considerations, just someone needs help. Ethan looked down at his daughter, then back at the scene unfolding 70 yards away. The woman's eyes locked with his for just a moment, wide, terrified, pleading. She knew she was out of time. She knew no help was coming. In that instant, Ethan Ward made a choice. Not the smart choice, not the safe choice, maybe not even the right choice, but the only choice he could live with. "Maya," he said, his voice dropping into that absolute calm that his team members used to call his operator voice. He knelt down, eye level with his daughter, both hands on her small shoulders. "I need you to listen very carefully, okay? This is important." She nodded, eyes huge but trusting. "I need you to run, fast as you can, to the supermarket entrance. Find a woman with kids, someone who looks like a mom, and you stay with her. Tell her to call 911. Can you do that for me?" "But Daddy..." "Maya." His tone left no room for argument. "I need you to be brave right now. Can you be brave for me?" She nodded again, tears forming in her eyes, but her jaw set with determination. "When I say go, you run. Don't look back. Don't stop. Straight to the entrance. You understand?" "What are you going to do?" Ethan's eyes flicked back to the van. The woman was almost inside now, her struggles weakening. The man with the knife was scanning the parking lot, looking for witnesses, calculating risks. "I'm going to help that lady," Ethan said simply. "Then I'm going to come right back to you. I promise." "Okay, Daddy." He kissed her forehead fast and hard. "I love you, baby. Now go!" Maya took off running, her backpack bouncing, her legs pumping as fast as they could carry her toward the bright lights of the supermarket entrance 200 yards away. Ethan watched just long enough to see her clear the immediate area, then turned his full attention to the van. The old switch flipped. The civilian disappeared. The operator emerged. Ethan started walking, his gait loose and casual, just another shopper crossing the parking lot. 70 yards. He had maybe 30 seconds before they got the woman fully inside the van. His eyes cataloged everything in rapid succession. 3 hostiles. Primary threat, knife guy, athletic build, standing at the van's door. Secondary threats, the heavy-set one holding the woman, and a third man, shorter, nervous energy, sitting in the driver's seat, engine running. Van was a white Dodge, probably 10 years old, no windows in the back. License plate was deliberately mudded, barely visible, professional. This wasn't their first time. 60 yards. No visible firearms, but that didn't mean they weren't armed. The van's position was smart, tucked in shadows, poor sightlines for most of the parking lot. They'd scouted this location. They knew what they were doing, 50 yards. Ethan's mind ran through scenarios: approach angle, threat sequencing, escalation management. In a perfect world, he'd have backup, communications, less lethal options. In the real world, he had his hands, his training, and about 20 seconds. The woman's scream cut through the air again, weaker now, 40 yards. The knife wielder suddenly looked up, eyes scanning, and locked onto Ethan. There was a moment of assessment. This middle-aged guy in jeans and a faded polo shirt, hands empty, walking alone. Not a cop, not a threat. The man dismissed him and turned back to the van. Hurry the hell up. 30 yards. Ethan's breathing steadied. His hands relaxed at his sides. Every muscle in his body coiled like a spring, ready to explode into action but appearing completely calm. It was a state of being he'd achieved hundreds of times. The moment before going through a door, before fast roping into a hot LZ, before engaging an enemy that didn't yet know he was there. 20 yards. Hey! Ethan called out, his voice friendly, confused. You guys need some help there. All three men turned. The driver's window was down, and Ethan could see him reach for something, phone or weapon, impossible to tell. Knife guy's body language shifted, suddenly alert. Mind your business, buddy, the knife wielder said, but his hand tightened on the blade, holding it ready, 15 yards. Yeah, it just looks like that lady doesn't want to get in your van, Ethan continued, still walking, still casual. He could see the woman's face now, bruise forming on her cheek, tears streaming, absolute terror mixed with a desperate spark of hope. Maybe we should just call the cops, let them sort it out? I said mind your goddamn business. The knife came up, pointing at Ethan. Walk away. Now. 10 yards. This was the moment. This was where most people would stop, where the lizard brain's survival instinct would override everything else. The knife was a line in the sand, a clear message. Cross this line and people get hurt. Ethan didn't stop walking. Here's the thing, he said, his voice dropping to something colder, harder. That's not going to happen. 8 yards. The shift in Ethan's tone made all three men hesitate. Something in his eyes, in the way he moved, triggered a primal recognition. Predator spotting predator. The heavy-set guy's grip on the woman loosened fractionally. The driver's hand definitely went for something under his seat. 6 yards. Last chance, asshole. Knife guy's voice pitched higher, uncertainty creeping in. I will cut you. No, Ethan said quietly. You won't. And then he moved. Years of training, thousands of hours of muscle memory, condensed into explosive action. Ethan covered the final 6 yards in less than 2 seconds, closing distance before the knife wielder could process the movement. The man thrust the blade forward in a wild, panicked stab. Ethan wasn't there. He'd already sidestepped, his left hand snapping out to trap the knife hand at the wrist, controlling the weapon. His right hand drove forward in a palm strike that caught the man just under the nose. Not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to stun. The man's head snapped back, eyes losing focus. Ethan rotated the trapped wrist in a smooth, practiced motion. Small bones in the wrist grinding, leverage applied at the perfect angle. The knife clattered to the pavement. One heartbeat later, Ethan's elbow crashed into the side of the man's head. The knife wielder dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Time elapsed. 3 seconds. The heavy-set guy released the woman and lunged at Ethan with a wild haymaker. Ethan saw it coming a mile away. Telegraphed, overcommitted, all power, and no technique. He ducked under the punch, letting momentum carry his attacker forward, and drove his knee into the man's solar plexus. Air exploded from the heavy-set guy's lungs. While he was doubled over, gasping, Ethan grabbed the back of his head and drove it down to meet his rising knee. The impact made a sound like a wet towel hitting concrete. The heavy-set guy collapsed, unconscious before he hit the ground. Time elapsed. 7 seconds total. The woman stood frozen, mouth open, backing away from the sudden violence but unable to process what she was witnessing. Get behind me, Ethan ordered, not taking his eyes off the van. She scrambled to obey, putting Ethan between herself and the remaining threat. The driver's door flew open, and the third man stumbled out, something dark and metallic in his hand. Ethan's body tensed, ready to move. If that was a gun, the tactical picture changed dramatically. But it wasn't a gun. It was a tire iron, gripped in shaking hands. "Stay back," the driver shouted, voice cracking. He was young, maybe 25, trying to look tough, but fear naked on his face. "I'm warning you, man." Ethan started walking toward him, steady and inevitable. "Don't!" The driver swung the tire iron in a wild arc, keeping distance. Ethan didn't slow down. He'd faced men armed with actual assault rifles, in actual war zones, backed by actual training. A terrified kid with the tire iron wasn't even on the same scale. "Last chance to put that down and run," Ethan said flatly. The driver swung again, more desperate this time. Ethan caught the tire iron mid-swing with his left hand, metal ringing against his palm. The shock of impact would have broken a normal person's hand. Ethan barely registered it. He yanked hard, pulling the driver off balance, and delivered a straight right to the jaw. Measured, controlled, just enough force. The driver's eyes rolled back and he crumpled. Time elapsed, 12 seconds total. Silence fell over the scene like a blanket. 3 men down, unconscious or incapacitated. The woman was staring at Ethan with an expression caught between relief and shock. "Are you hurt?" Ethan asked, his breathing barely elevated. "Did they... No, I'm..." She couldn't seem to form words. Her hands were shaking violently. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Someone had finally called 911. Ethan looked around the parking lot. Now there were dozens of people staring, phones out, recording. "Great. Just great." "Okay," Ethan said gently, shifting back to his normal voice, the operator receding once more. "You're safe now. The police are coming. Just breathe, okay? You're safe." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and then suddenly she was hugging him, sobbing into his shoulder. Ethan stood awkwardly for a moment, then carefully patted her back, his eyes still scanning for additional threats, his tactical awareness still fully engaged. That's when he remembered. Maya. His head snapped toward the supermarket entrance. There. Thank God. He could see her small figure standing with a middle-aged woman, both of them staring in his direction. Even from this distance, he could see Maya's wide eyes, her hands clutched to her chest. She'd watched everything. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. What had he just done? What had he just exposed his 7-year-old daughter to? Images of himself, cold, violent, efficient, played through his mind. That wasn't the father she knew. That wasn't the man he'd tried so hard to become after leaving the Navy. The sirens were getting louder. 2 police cruisers screamed into the parking lot, lights flashing, officers jumping out with weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them!" an officer shouted. Ethan immediately stepped away from the woman, raising his hands high, making himself as non-threatening as possible. "I'm the one who called 911, he lied smoothly. These 3 men were trying to kidnap this woman. They're all down, no weapons in reach. The knife is on the ground near the tall one." The officers approached cautiously, taking in the scene. 3 unconscious men, a terrified woman, and Ethan standing calm with his hands raised. One officer immediately went to the woman while 2 others moved to secure the downed men. "Sir, I need you to keep your hands visible and move over here," the older officer said, less aggressive now but still cautious. "Absolutely, officer." Ethan complied immediately, moving where directed. "My daughter's over there by the supermarket. She's 7. I need to get to her. She's scared." The officer followed Ethan's gaze and saw Maya, then nodded slowly. "In a minute, sir. First, I need to understand what happened here." Over the next 10 minutes, as more police arrived and paramedics began checking the unconscious men, Ethan gave his statement. He was careful, measured, downplaying his own role. Just a concerned citizen who intervened. Got lucky. They were caught off guard. He used to do some martial arts, nothing special. Things happened fast. The woman, she'd given her name as Claire but was too shaken to say much more, corroborated everything. She kept saying Ethan saved her life, kept looking at him like he was something miraculous. One of the paramedics examining the downed men looked up at the police officer with raised eyebrows. "Sir, these injuries, they're precise. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Minimal damage, but maximum effectiveness." The older officer looked at Ethan with new interest. Sir, what did you say you did for a living? I'm in private security, Ethan said, which was technically true. He did occasional consulting work for a security firm. Used to be military. What branch? Navy. What did you do in the Navy? Ethan met the officer's eyes steadily. I'd prefer not to say, officer. It's not relevant to what happened here. The officer held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He'd been around long enough to recognize that particular breed of silence. All right, sir. We'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement, but I don't see any reason to detain you. You're free to go to your daughter. Thank you, officer. Ethan walked toward the supermarket entrance, each step feeling heavier than the last. Maya saw him coming and broke away from the woman she'd been standing with, running toward him. He caught her as she launched herself into his arms, burying her face against his shoulder. It's okay, baby, he whispered into her hair. It's all okay now. But as he held his daughter, feeling her small body shake with delayed shock, Ethan knew that nothing was okay. He'd crossed a line. The carefully constructed wall between his past and his present had crumbled in less than 30 seconds of violence. Daddy, you were so fast, Maya whispered. You were like a superhero. Ethan closed his eyes, fighting down the sick feeling in his stomach. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I'm just your dad. But you saved her. Yeah, I did. Are those bad men going to jail? Yeah, baby, they are. Maya pulled back slightly, looking up at him with those impossibly trusting eyes. I was scared. I know. I'm sorry. But you came back. You promised you would, and you did. The simple faith in her voice made Ethan's throat tight. I'll always come back to you, Maya. Always. The woman, Claire, approached hesitantly, escorted by one of the officers. Her eyes were still red from crying, but she'd composed herself somewhat. Up close, Ethan could see she was probably mid-20s, professional-looking even in her disheveled state. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said softly. I needed to thank you. What you did... Her voice broke. They were going to... I don't know what they were going to do, but you... I'm glad you're safe, Ethan said simply, uncomfortable with the attention. The police need my statement, but I wanted to... Can I give you my contact information? I'd like to properly thank you when everything settles. Ethan hesitated. Every instinct said to decline, to walk away, to return to anonymity. But Claire's eyes held something beyond gratitude. They held the desperate need to find some meaning in trauma, to connect with the person who'd pulled her back from the abyss. Sure, he said finally. She quickly scribbled her phone number on a piece of paper an officer provided, hands still shaking slightly. Thank you. Thank you so much. She couldn't finish, just pressed the paper into his hand and turned away, wiping her eyes. Ethan watched her go, then looked down at the number. He should throw it away. Should put this whole incident behind him. Should focus on getting Maya home and helping her process what she'd witnessed. Instead, he folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Can we go home now, Daddy? Maya asked quietly. Yeah, sweetheart. Let's go home. They walked back to the truck in silence, Ethan's hand firmly holding Maya's. The police had the three men in custody now, all conscious but secured. As Ethan loaded the groceries into his truck, the mundane task feeling surreal after what had just happened, he caught one of the men staring at him from the back of a police car. The look in the man's eyes wasn't fear or anger. It was recognition, and something else, something calculating. Ethan turned away, focusing on buckling Maya into her booster seat, but the unease settled into his gut like a stone. This wasn't over. He could feel it, that same instinct that had kept him alive through a dozen deployments screaming a warning. But he pushed it down, started the truck, and pulled out of the parking lot. Behind them, police lights still flashed against the afternoon sun. Ahead was home, safety, normalcy, or so he tried to tell himself. The drive home was quiet. Maya stared out the window, processing. Ethan gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, his mind replaying the encounter, analyzing every moment, every decision. Daddy? Maya's small voice broke the silence. Yeah, baby? Are you going to get in trouble? The question caught him off guard. What? No, sweetheart. I helped someone. That's not getting in trouble. But you hurt those men. Ethan took a slow breath. How did you explain necessary violence to a 7-year-old? How did you make a child understand the brutal calculus of force protection without stealing her innocence? Sometimes, he said carefully, bad people try to hurt good people. And when that happens, sometimes the only way to stop them is to make them stop. Does that make sense? I think so. She was quiet for a moment. Like when you kill bad guys in the Navy? Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. They'd never talked about this. He'd always deflected her questions about his time in the service, kept it vague, kept it clean. It's different, Maya, but kind of, yeah. Were you scared? No. Why not? Because fear was trained out of him years ago. Because when he was moving, executing, fighting, there wasn't room for fear, only for action, reaction, adaptation. Because he'd done far worse things in far worse places against far more dangerous enemies. Because I knew what I had to do, he said instead, and I knew I had to get back to you. That seemed to satisfy her. She went back to looking out the window, and Ethan drove on autopilot, his mind miles away. Home was a modest single-story house in a quiet neighborhood, exactly the kind of anonymous, comfortable suburban life he'd craved after years of uncertainty and danger. He pulled into the driveway and killed the engine, but didn't immediately get out. Maya, he said, turning to look at his daughter. What happened today? That's not normal, okay? That's not something you're going to see again. Okay, Daddy. And if anyone asks you about it, kids at school, teachers, anyone, you just tell them your dad helped a lady in trouble. That's all. Okay? She nodded solemnly, understanding in her own way that this was important. They went inside and Ethan tried to establish normalcy, putting away groceries, making dinner, the evening routine. But his mind wouldn't settle. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the scene playing out differently. What if one of them had been armed with a gun? What if they'd grabbed Maya instead of running? What if the knife had connected? What if? After putting Maya to bed, with an extra story and an extra long hug, Ethan stood in his living room, staring at nothing. The house felt too quiet, too still. His hands were steady, but inside he was vibrating with unspent adrenaline and delayed reaction. He'd kept it together for Maya. Now, alone, the full weight crashed down. He'd risked everything today. Everything. For a stranger. He'd put his daughter in potential danger, exposed her to violence, shattered the peaceful civilian life he'd worked so hard to build. And for what? To play hero? To recapture some echo of his old life? The guilt was crushing, but underneath it, there was something else. Something he didn't want to acknowledge. He'd felt alive. For those 12 seconds of combat, every sense sharp, every movement precise, every decision crystal clear, he'd felt more himself than he had in the 3 years since leaving the teams. It was like finding water after wandering through a desert, like taking a full breath after suffocating. And that terrified him more than anything else. Because if he craved that feeling, if some part of him had missed the violence and the clarity and the purpose, what did that make him? What kind of father was he? What kind of man? Ethan walked to the kitchen and poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, a rare indulgence. He sat at the kitchen table, in the dark, and tried to make sense of the war inside his own head. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then remembered the police had taken his information. The text message made his blood run cold. We know who you are. We know where you live. We don't forget. Ethan stared at the screen, his operational mind immediately spinning up. Anonymous threat. Probably from associates of the 3 men he'd taken down. They'd had time to make calls before being processed. Or maybe someone had been watching from a distance, got his license plate. He should call the police, report the threat, follow proper civilian procedures. Instead, he set the phone down and took a long drink of whiskey, because a threat meant this wasn't over. A threat meant he'd pulled himself back into exactly the kind of situation he'd tried to leave behind. A threat meant Maya was potentially in danger because of his choice. The smart move was to call the police, increase security, Be vigilant, but cautious. But Ethan Ward hadn't stayed alive through 12 years of special operations by being passive. Threats weren't something you waited out. They were something you eliminated. He finished his whiskey and stood, his reflection ghosting across the dark kitchen window. The man staring back looked tired, older than his 42 years, but his eyes held something that hadn't been there that morning. Purpose. Ethan walked to Maya's room and stood in the doorway, watching her sleep. Her breathing was soft and even, her small face peaceful. She trusted him completely, believed he could protect her from anything. "I'm sorry, baby," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." But he wasn't sorry enough to have made a different choice. As he turned away, his phone buzzed again. Another message. "Sleep tight." Ethan's jaw tightened. He walked to his bedroom closet and moved aside a stack of boxes. Behind them was a small fire-rated safe. He entered the combination and opened it. Inside was his old service weapon, a Sig Sauer Peter 26 that he'd carried on more operations than he could count. Beside it were spare magazines, a tactical flashlight, and a knife with a matte black blade. Equipment he'd told himself he'd never need again. He took out the pistol, checked the action, and loaded a magazine. The weight in his hand was achingly familiar. He chambered a round, engaged the safety, and slipped it into a quick-access safe he kept bolted inside his nightstand. Then he sat on his bed and waited for morning. He didn't sleep. He rarely did anymore, not really. Instead, he drifted in that half-aware state that special operators learn to exist in, resting but ready, conscious of every sound in the house, every shift in the environment. At 3:47 a.m., a car slowed down outside his house. Engine note suggested a sedan, maybe Japanese make. It didn't stop, but it definitely slowed, deliberate, assessing. Ethan was at the window in seconds, just the edge of the curtain moved, watching. He caught a glimpse of taillights before the car accelerated away. Couldn't get a plate, too dark, too fast. Reconnaissance. They were establishing patterns, checking security, looking for vulnerabilities. Professional. Ethan's mind started running tactical calculations. Home security system was basic at best. Clear sight lines from the street, multiple entry points. If they came in force, if they came prepared. He pushed the thoughts away. This was paranoia. One threatening text and a slow-moving car didn't constitute an imminent threat. He was overreacting, letting old instincts override common sense. Except those instincts had kept him alive when common sense would have gotten him killed. Dawn came slowly, the Arizona sky lightening from black to deep blue to pale gold. Ethan made coffee, strong and black, and stood at his kitchen window watching the neighborhood wake up. Sprinklers hissing to life, dogs being walked, newspapers hitting driveways, normal, safe, except it didn't feel safe anymore. At 7:15 a.m., Maya padded into the kitchen in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, sweetheart." He poured her a glass of orange juice and started making pancakes. Sunday morning tradition. "How'd you sleep?" "Okay, I had weird dreams." "Yeah? What about?" "There was a lady in trouble and you turned into a robot and saved her." She giggled at the absurdity. Ethan forced a smile. "That's pretty weird, all right." They fell into the comfortable rhythm of Sunday morning. Breakfast, cartoons, Maya's homework for Monday. Ethan went through the motions while part of his mind stayed on high alert, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It came at 9:37 a.m. The doorbell rang. Ethan's hand automatically went to his hip, muscle memory reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. He took a breath, forced himself to relax, and walked to the door. Through the peephole, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Two men in dress uniforms. Navy. One was a captain, 06, enough brass on his collar to indicate serious rank. The other was a commander, slightly younger, carrying a briefcase. Both stood at attention, faces professionally neutral. This wasn't a social call. Ethan opened the door, his mind racing through possibilities. Stop-loss recall? Some kind of investigation into yesterday? Issue with his pension or clearances? "Ethan Ward?" the captain asked. "Yes, sir." "I'm Captain Morrison, and this is Commander Hayes. We're here on behalf of Rear Admiral Thomas Brennan. May we come in?" "An admiral." A flag officer was sending representatives to his house on a Sunday morning. This was either very good or catastrophically bad, and Ethan couldn't imagine what would qualify as good. Of course, sir. Ethan stepped aside, letting them in. Maya appeared from the living room, eyes wide at the sight of the uniforms. Daddy? It's okay, sweetheart. These are some people I used to work with. Why don't you go watch your show? I'll be right there. She retreated reluctantly, and Ethan led the two officers to his kitchen table. They sat, and Captain Morrison opened the briefcase, pulling out a tablet and several documents. Mr. Ward, Morrison began, his tone formal but not unfriendly. We're here about the incident yesterday at the Northgate Shopping Center. The woman you assisted, Claire Brennan, is Lieutenant Claire Brennan, Naval Intelligence. She's Admiral Brennan's daughter. Ethan's world tilted slightly. Naval Intelligence. Admiral's daughter. This had just become exponentially more complicated. I didn't know, he said carefully. We're aware. Lieutenant Brennan was on her way home from a classified debriefing when the incident occurred. The three men who attempted to abduct her were part of an organization we've been tracking for the past 8 months. Commander Hayes pulled up something on the tablet and turned it toward Ethan. Security footage, multiple angles of the parking lot showing the entire encounter. Whoever had compiled this had access to private security feeds, traffic cameras, even cell phone footage from witnesses. Mr. Ward, your service record indicates you were a SEAL, Team 3, then Team 6, DevGru, 3 tours in Afghanistan, 2 in Iraq, multiple other deployments that remain classified. Silver Star, Bronze Star with Valor, Purple Heart. You left the service 3 years ago with an honorable discharge. It wasn't a question, but Ethan nodded anyway. They weren't here to reminisce about his service record. What you did yesterday, Morrison continued, was remarkable, also reckless, also potentially very dangerous, not just for you, but for an ongoing federal investigation. There it was. Barrett, the hammer. Sir, I was just trying to help. We know, and you did. You saved Lieutenant Brennan's life, but you also compromised months of investigative work. Those 3 men were surveillance targets. We were building a case, tracking their movements, mapping their organization. By intervening, you forced us to arrest them immediately, before we could fully develop the network. Ethan felt anger flash through him. With respect, sir, your surveillance targets were in the process of kidnapping someone, a Navy officer, in broad daylight. If I hadn't intervened, she would be dead or missing, and the blood would be on our hands, Morrison interrupted. We know that. Admiral Brennan knows that. Which is why he's asked to speak with you personally. Why? Because the 3 men you disabled are talking. They're low-level, scared, facing serious charges. They're giving up names, locations, operational details. We've rolled up 6 more arrests overnight. But in doing so, we've exposed a gap in our intelligence. Commander Hayes leaned forward. Mr. Ward, these men weren't random criminals. They're part of a sophisticated human trafficking operation with ties to international criminal organizations, military-grade operational security. They're moving women across state lines, possibly internationally, and we still don't know the full scope. What does this have to do with me? Your face is now known to them, Morrison said bluntly. The organization, I mean. They'll have identified you within hours of the arrests, which means you and your daughter are potential targets for retaliation. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Everything Ethan had feared since last night confirmed. How serious a threat? He asked, his voice level despite the ice in his veins. Serious enough that Admiral Brennan is offering you protective detail and relocation assistance. Relocation? Ethan laughed bitterly. Uproot my daughter's entire life because I did the right thing? The alternative is risking both your lives, Hayes said quietly. These aren't street criminals, Mr. Ward. They're organized, well-funded, and they don't forgive disruptions to their operations. Ethan stared at the table, mind racing. Relocation meant new city, new school for Maya, new identities potentially. Meant running, hiding, living in fear, everything he'd fought not to become. There's another option, Morrison said after a moment, one that Admiral Brennan specifically asked us to present. What option? Help us finish what you started. Help us take down the entire organization. And there it was, the real reason they were here. Ethan looked up sharply. I'm retired. You'd be contracted as a civilian security consultant, 6 months maximum. You'd work with a joint task force, FBI, DHS, Naval Intelligence. Your experience, your skills, you'd be invaluable. And my daughter? Protected. Full security detail, relocated temporarily if necessary, but you'd have regular access. This isn't a deployment, Mr. Ward. This is domestic counter-trafficking work. You're asking me to leave my daughter and go back to work I walked away from 3 years ago. We're asking you to help protect your daughter by eliminating the threat rather than running from it, Morrison countered. We're asking you to use your abilities to save people, women and children, who are trapped in one of the most evil enterprises on the planet. And yes, we're asking you to do what you're trained to do. Ethan stood, pacing to the window. Outside, Maya's bicycle lay on its side in the driveway. Her chalk drawings decorated the concrete. Normal life, safe life. Except it wasn't safe. Not anymore. Not if he did nothing. When does Admiral Brennan want an answer? He's outside, sir. Ethan's head snapped around. What? He insisted on coming personally. He's waiting in his vehicle, giving you time to process. But he'd like to speak with you this morning. For a long moment, Ethan couldn't speak. An admiral, a flag officer with dozens of other responsibilities, had personally driven to his house on a Sunday morning. That wasn't standard procedure. That was desperation, or respect, or both. Tell him I'll talk to him, Ethan said finally. But I'm not making any promises. Captain Morrison stood, relief flickering across his professional mask. Understood, sir. Thank you. As the two officers left to retrieve the Admiral, Ethan stood in his kitchen, feeling the weight of impossible choices bearing down on him. Yesterday, his biggest decision had been whether to get ice cream. Today, he was facing a decision that would define not just his future, but Maya's. And somewhere, in some dark corner of his mind, a voice whispered what he didn't want to admit. He'd already made his choice the moment he stepped between Claire Brennan and those 3 men. The operator never really leaves. The door opened again, and Rear Admiral Thomas Brennan stepped into Ethan Ward's kitchen. He was a tall man, late 50s, with steel-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd commanded men in combat. 2 stars gleamed on his collar, but his eyes, red-rimmed, exhausted, told a different story. This wasn't an admiral on official business. This was a father whose daughter had nearly been stolen. Mr. Ward, he said, extending his hand, thank you for seeing me. Ethan shook it, reading volumes in that simple gesture. Firm grip, but not aggressive, respectful, equal to equal, despite the vast gulf in rank. Admiral, can I get you some coffee? Please. They sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Ethan had drunk whiskey alone in the dark hours before dawn. Brennan accepted the coffee and took a long drink before speaking. My daughter is alive because of you, he said simply. There's no amount of gratitude that can properly express what that means to me, to her mother, to our family. I'm glad I was there, sir. You were more than there. You were Brennan paused, searching for words. I've read your file, Mr. Ward. I know what you're capable of, and I've watched the footage of yesterday. Claire had maybe 20 seconds before they got her into that van, 20 seconds before she disappeared into a network we've been trying to dismantle for months. You gave us, a chance. Sir, with respect, your officers said I compromised your investigation. You did, Brennan acknowledged. And I don't care. Not about the investigation, not about the operational timeline, not about any of it. My daughter is alive. The investigation can adapt. We'll rebuild what we need to rebuild, but you can't rebuild a life. The raw emotion in the Admiral's voice made Ethan uncomfortable. He wasn't used to seeing flag officers show vulnerability. What is it you want from me, sir? Brennan set down his coffee cup. I want you to help me destroy the people who tried to take my daughter. Not just the 3 men you stopped, the whole organization. The ones who profit from misery and suffering. The ones who treat human beings as commodities. I'm not active duty anymore. I know, and I'm not asking you to come back. I'm asking you to do contract work. 6 months. Consultative role with the task force. You'd have authority to operate, but you'd be civilian. No recall to service. No military restrictions. And if I say no, Brennan's face hardened. Then I activate every resource at my disposal to protect you and your daughter anyway, because that's my responsibility. But we'll both know that somewhere out there, women are being trafficked, sold, destroyed, and we had a chance to stop it, but didn't take it. That's not fair, sir. No, it's not. None of this is fair. It's not fair that my daughter got targeted because of her work. It's not fair that you got pulled into this because you were a good man in the right place. It's not fair that I'm sitting in your kitchen asking you to risk yourself again after you've already given years of your life to service. But here we are. Ethan stared at the Admiral, seeing not just the rank and authority, but the father underneath. The man who'd nearly lost everything. I have a daughter too, Ethan said quietly. She's 7. She's all I have. I left the teams because I wanted to be there for her, because I wanted to give her a normal childhood, with a father who didn't disappear for months at a time, who wasn't risking his life in places she couldn't even know about. I understand that. I do. Do you? Because I'm not sure you understand what you're asking. You're asking me to become exactly what I walked away from. To put Maya in danger by association. To potentially leave her orphaned if something goes wrong. His voice rose slightly, years of suppressed fear and guilt bleeding through. I made a promise to my wife before she died. I promised her I'd keep our daughter safe, that I'd be there, that I wouldn't let the job take me away from her. Brennan let the words hang in the air for a moment before responding. My daughter is 26 years old. She's brilliant, dedicated, serves her country with distinction. And yesterday she called me from the police station, terrified and traumatized because evil men tried to steal her future. Every instinct I have as a father screams at me to wrap her in protection and never let her out of my sight. But I can't, because there are more daughters out there, younger daughters, girls who don't have fathers with Admiral's stars who can move heaven and earth to protect them. He leaned forward, his voice intense. You kept a promise yesterday, Mr. Ward. You saw someone who needed help, and you helped her, despite the risk, despite having every reason to walk away. That promise, to protect those who can't protect themselves, is it less valid because the threat is ongoing rather than immediate? Ethan closed his eyes. The weight of the decision was crushing. Every tactical bone in his body said this was a mistake. Every protective instinct screamed to grab Maya and run as far as possible. But every moral fiber, every value he'd tried to instill in his daughter, every reason he'd served in the first place, said Brennan was right. If I do this, Ethan said slowly, I need absolute assurance that Maya is protected. Not just security detail. I need to know she's safe, happy, maintaining her routine as much as possible. Done. We'll work out the details, but her safety is non-negotiable, and I operate on my terms. I consult, I advise, but I don't take orders that put me in unnecessary risk. I'm not an active operator anymore. I'm a father first. Agreed. 6 months, not a day longer. When this is done, I walk away and you make sure I stay walked away. No more calls, no more recruiters, no more just one more job. Brennan nodded. You have my word. Ethan stood, walking to the window again. Outside, the neighborhood was fully awake now. Kids riding bikes, families heading to church, the peaceful Sunday rhythm of suburban America. Everything he'd wanted, everything he'd built, everything he might lose. I need to talk to Maya, he said finally. I need to explain something. She doesn't need all the details, but she needs to know her dad might be gone sometimes. She needs to know why. Take the time you need. We'll begin coordination whenever you're ready. Brennan stood to leave, then paused. Mr. Ward, Ethan, my daughter told me something this morning. She said, when she looked at you, when you were standing between her and those men, she wasn't afraid anymore. Not because she thought you'd win, she didn't know if you would, but because she saw that you'd already decided you would rather die than let them take her. That kind of commitment, that kind of courage, it's rare. Thank you. After the Admiral left, Ethan stood alone in his kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he walked to Maya's room. She was playing with her dolls, creating some elaborate story involving princesses and dragons. She looked up when he entered, her smile bright and innocent and completely trusting. Hey, baby, can we talk for a minute? Sure, Daddy. She put down her toys and patted the bed beside her. Ethan sat, trying to find words adequate for this moment. How did you tell a 7-year-old that the world was darker and more dangerous than she knew? That her father had to step back into that darkness to make it a little bit lighter? You know how yesterday I helped that lady? He began. Yeah, you were really brave. Well, it turns out that there are more people who need help, and the people I used to work with, in the Navy, they asked if I could help them for a little while. Maya's expression shifted, becoming serious beyond her years. Would you have to go away? Sometimes. Not all the time, and never for very long. But sometimes I might have to travel for a few days. Like when Mommy had to go to the hospital? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. She so rarely mentioned her mother, and when she did, it was always with that same careful tone, testing to see if it was okay to talk about. Kind of like that, he said gently. But I'll always come back, always. That's a promise. Maya was quiet for a moment, her small face thoughtful. Then she said something that broke his heart and made him proud in equal measure. If you can help people like you helped that lady yesterday, then you should do it, even if it's scary. Ethan pulled her into a hug, holding her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo and childhood innocence. When did you get so smart? I don't know. Maybe I was always smart and you just noticed. He laughed, the sound surprising him. Maybe you're right. That afternoon, after Maya was settled watching a movie, Ethan made a call to someone he hadn't spoken to in nearly a year. Mike Chen picked up on the third ring. Ward? That really you? Yeah, it's me. Man, I thought you fell off the face of the earth. You doing okay? I need to talk, Mike. In person if possible. You still in Phoenix? A pause. Mike had been Ethan's team leader for 4 years, had pulled him out of more bad situations than either of them could count. If anyone would understand what Ethan was facing, it was him. I'm in Scottsdale. Give me an address and I'll be there in an hour. When Mike arrived, he took one look at Ethan's face and said, This is serious. They sat on Ethan's back patio while Maya played inside, and Ethan laid out everything, the parking lot, the Admirals, the offer, the choice. Mike listened without interrupting, his expression grave. When Ethan finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You know what I'm going to say, Mike finally said. Tell me anyway. You're an operator, Ward. It's not what you do, it's what you are. You can try to bury it, try to be civilian, try to build a white picket fence life. But when the moment comes, when someone needs help and you're the only one who can provide it, you're never going to walk away. Yesterday proved that. I have Maya to think about. And you're thinking about her. You're thinking about the world she's going to grow up in, about whether it's a little bit safer or a little bit more dangerous based on the choices you make right now. Mike leaned forward. You think those trafficking networks are going to just disappear? You think other fathers' daughters are any less valuable than yours? That's not fair. No, it's not. Nothing about this is fair. But you know what else isn't fair? Having the ability to make a real difference and choosing not to use it because it's uncomfortable or risky or disrupts your plans. Ethan stared at his hands, hands that yesterday had disabled 3 men in less than 15 seconds. Hands that had held his daughter as a baby. Hands that had signed his wife's death certificate. I'm scared, Mike. Not of the mission. I can handle that. I'm scared of what happens to Maya if I don't come back. I'm scared I'm being selfish, choosing to feel useful again instead of being the father she needs. You're the father she needs because you're the man who stepped in yesterday. Because you taught her that when you see someone in trouble, you help them. Kids learn more from what we do than what we say, Ward. What do you want her to learn? That courage matters, or that comfort matters more? The words settled into Ethan's chest like stones, heavy with truth. They talked for another hour. Logistics, security considerations, how to balance the work with being present for Maya. Mike offered to help coordinate with the task force, to serve as a liaison if needed. By the time he left, Ethan felt clearer than he had since yesterday afternoon. That evening, after putting Maya to bed, Ethan pulled out the piece of paper with Claire Brennan's number. He typed out a text message. This is Ethan Ward. I wanted to check in and make sure you're doing okay. The response came within 2 minutes. I'm okay. Shaken, but okay. Thank you again for what you did. My father told me he spoke with you today. I hope you'll help us. Not just because I want justice, but because I've seen what they're planning, and it's worse than you can imagine." Ethan stared at that message for a long time. Worse than you can imagine. He'd seen a lot in 12 years of warfare. Child soldiers, mass graves, villages destroyed for strategic advantage. He could imagine quite a lot. But the idea that this thing happening in shopping center parking lots in suburban America, in the supposed safety of civilization, could be worse? He typed a response. "I'm in. Tell your father I'll start tomorrow." And with those words, Ethan Ward stepped back through a door he'd thought he'd closed forever. Not because he wanted to, not because it was safe, but because sometimes the hardest right choice is the only choice you can live with. That night, he didn't sleep at all. He sat in Maya's doorway, watching her peaceful face in the dim glow of her nightlight, and made silent promises. He'd be careful. He'd be smart. He'd survive this and come back to her. And he'd make damn sure that what happened to Claire Brennan didn't happen to anyone else's daughter. When dawn came, Ethan Ward was ready. Ready to fight again. Ready to protect again. Ready to be the man his daughter had seen yesterday. Not a superhero, but a father who refused to turn away when others needed help. The operator had returned. But this time, he was fighting for more than just mission success. He was fighting to make the world safe enough for little girls to skip through parking lots without fear. And that was a mission worth any risk. The Monday morning sun cut through the blinds of the FBI field office in downtown Phoenix, casting sharp lines across the conference table where Ethan sat, surrounded by people who represented the full weight of federal law enforcement. Special Agent Sarah Reeves from the FBI's Human Trafficking Task Force sat directly across from him, her dark eyes assessing him with the particular intensity of someone who'd seen too much and trusted too little. To her left was Agent Marcus Chen from Homeland Security Investigations, younger, but carrying himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd earned his place at the table. Commander Hayes from Naval Intelligence occupied the far end, his tablet already displaying what Ethan recognized as operational briefing materials. Admiral Brennan stood at the head of the table, and beside him sat Claire Brennan herself. She looked different from the terrified woman in the parking lot, composed now, professional in her navy khakis. But Ethan could see the shadow that lingered behind her eyes. Trauma didn't just disappear because you put on a uniform and showed up for work. "Thank you all for being here," Brennan began. "Mr. Ward has agreed to consult with the task force on a 6-month contract. His background and skill set make him uniquely qualified to assist in the operational aspects of dismantling this trafficking network." Agent Reeves leaned back in her chair, her expression skeptical. "No disrespect to Mr. Ward's service record, but we have trained federal agents working this case. What exactly does a retired SEAL bring to the table that we don't already have?" Ethan had expected this. Interagency cooperation was always complicated, and bringing in an outsider, especially one with a military rather than law enforcement background, would naturally create friction. "He brings the ability to think like they do," Claire said quietly, before Ethan could respond. "The men who tried to take me weren't street criminals. They moved like they had training, military bearing, operational discipline. We need someone who understands that mindset." "Lieutenant Brennan is correct," Agent Chen added, pulling up a file on the main display screen. "We've been tracking this organization for 8 months. What started as a local investigation into suspected trafficking has evolved into something much larger. The 3 men Mr. Ward encountered, Dmitry Volkov, Carlos Mendez, and James Patterson, all have military or paramilitary backgrounds. Volkov served in the Russian army. Mendez was Mexican Special Forces before going private. Patterson did 2 tours with the 82nd Airborne before a dishonorable discharge." The screen showed mugshots and service records. Ethan studied each face, committing them to memory. Volkov was the one he'd taken down first, the knife wielder. Mendez had been the heavy, Patterson the nervous driver. "Since their arrest Saturday," Chen continued, "we've leveraged their testimonies to execute 6 additional arrests and 3 search warrants. What we've found is disturbing. This isn't just a local operation. It's a node in an international network moving women from Eastern Europe, South America, and Southeast Asia into the United States." Agent Reeves pulled up additional files. "The operation is sophisticated. They use legitimate businesses as fronts, import-export companies, staffing agencies, even a modeling agency. Women are recruited with promises of legitimate work, then their documentation is confiscated and they're forced into prostitution or domestic servitude. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. He'd seen human trafficking during deployments, entire villages in Afghanistan where girls simply disappeared, markets in Iraq where human beings were bought and sold like livestock. He'd thought that kind of evil stayed in war zones. The idea that it was happening here, in American cities, made his blood run cold. "How many victims are we talking about?" he asked. "That we know of?" 43 women recovered in the past year across 4 states, Reeves said. "But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Based on financial records we've seized, we estimate this network moves between 200 and 300 women annually." The number hung in the air like a physical weight. 300 lives destroyed. 300 families shattered every single year. "What's the organizational structure?" Ethan asked, his mind already shifting into operational mode. Commander Hayes took over the briefing. "We believe there are 3 tiers. Street-level operators like the men you encountered. They handle recruitment, transportation, and direct supervision of victims. Mid-level coordinators who manage logistics, safe houses, and financial transactions. And at the top, a core leadership group that we've code-named the Syndicate." "The Syndicate runs the whole operation," Claire added, her voice steady, but Ethan could hear the underlying anger. "They're insulated by multiple layers of cutouts and intermediaries. We've never been able to identify them directly, let alone build a prosecutable case." "Until now," Agent Chen said, "Volkov is talking. He's terrified of going back to prison, and he's giving us names, locations, communication protocols. We've already identified a safe house in Tucson and another in Las Vegas. But here's the problem." He paused, looking directly at Ethan. "The Syndicate knows we've rolled up their street team. They're going to restructure, change protocols, possibly eliminate anyone they think might be compromised." "We have a window," Brennan said. "Maybe 2 weeks, maybe less, before they adapt and we lose our chance to move up the chain. That's where you come in, Mr. Ward." Ethan understood immediately. "You want me to help identify vulnerabilities in their security? Find ways to penetrate deeper into the organization before they can shore up their defenses." "Exactly. Your experience in covert operations, in thinking tactically about how to infiltrate and dismantle enemy networks, that's what we need." Agent Reeves was still skeptical, but she seemed to be warming slightly. "What we're proposing is that you work with our investigative team to analyze their operational security, help us plan tactical approaches to arrests and raids, and potentially provide protective detail for key witnesses who might be targeted." "I'm not a bodyguard," Ethan said flatly. "No, you're much more than that," Brennan replied. "You're someone who understands how violent men think, how they plan, how they react when cornered. That knowledge could be the difference between recovering victims safely and walking into a bloodbath." Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking out over the Phoenix skyline. Somewhere out there, women were being held against their will. Somewhere out there, the men responsible were already adapting, already planning their next move. "What are the rules of engagement?" he asked without turning around. "You're a civilian consultant," Reeves said carefully. "You observe, you advise, but you don't engage unless there's imminent threat to life. You're not authorized to conduct arrests or use force except in self-defense or defense of others. So I'm neutered." "You're protected," she corrected. "If something goes wrong, if this ends up in court, we need clean chains of custody and by-the-book procedures. You stepping outside those boundaries could compromise prosecutions." Ethan turned back to face the room. "And if someone's in danger? If we're on a raid and things go sideways?" Agent Chen met his eyes. "Then you do what you did Saturday. You make the call in the moment, but you better be damn sure it's justified because every action will be scrutinized." It wasn't ideal, but it was workable. Ethan had operated under far more restrictive rules of engagement in combat zones. At least here, nobody was going to question split-second decisions with quite the same Monday morning quarterback intensity. "All right," he said, "where do we start?" The next 3 hours were a deep dive into case files, surveillance footage, financial records, and intelligence assessments. Ethan absorbed it all, his mind cataloging patterns and connections. The network was indeed sophisticated, but sophistication always came with complexity, and complexity meant vulnerabilities. By noon, his head was swimming with names, locations, and operational details. Agent Reeves called a break, and most of the team dispersed to grab lunch or make calls. Ethan stepped outside into the Phoenix heat, needing air and space to process. Claire followed him out. "Mr. Ward," she said quietly, "can I talk to you for a minute?" "It's just Ethan, and of course." They walked to a small courtyard area adjacent to the building, finding a bench in the shade. For a moment, neither spoke. "I wanted to apologize," Claire finally said. Ethan looked at her, surprised. "For what?" "For putting you in this position. If I'd been more careful, if I'd noticed the surveillance before they made their move—" "Stop." Ethan's voice was firm but not unkind. "You're not responsible for being targeted by criminals. That's on them, not you. My father told me you have a daughter, 7 years old. Maya, yeah. I can't imagine what you must think of me. Because of my work, because I wasn't careful enough, your daughter is potentially at risk." Ethan studied her face. The guilt there was genuine, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. He recognized it because he'd carried the same weight himself more times than he could count. "Can I tell you something my team leader used to say?" Ethan asked. "He said that in our line of work, we don't control the enemy's actions. We only control our response. You didn't choose to be targeted. I didn't choose to be in that parking lot at that exact moment. But we both made choices about how to respond. You fought. I intervened. Those were good choices. Even though it's put your daughter at risk? My daughter is at risk because evil people exist. That's the truth. Whether I'd been in that parking lot or not. At least this way I have a chance to do something about it." Claire nodded slowly, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "My father said you were remarkable. I didn't understand what he meant until I read your service record this morning. That record is classified. I have appropriate clearance. 3 silver stars, Ethan, 5 bronze stars, a Navy Cross, 17 confirmed high-value target eliminations. You spent 12 years doing the hardest, most dangerous work imaginable." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He'd never been comfortable discussing his record. Medals were just metal and ribbon. What they represented, the firefights, the close calls, the friends who didn't come home, those weren't things he liked to dwell on. "That was a different life," he said simply. "Was it? Because from where I'm sitting, you haven't changed at all. You're still the guy who runs toward danger when everyone else is running away." Before Ethan could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who was watching Maya while he was at the briefing. "Everything okay here? Maya is helping me bake cookies. Take your time." He showed Claire the message. "That's my real life now. Baking cookies and parent-teacher conferences. This," he gestured back toward the building, "this is temporary." "I hope you're right," Claire said quietly. "But I've seen what these people are capable of. I've interviewed victims. I've seen the trauma, the broken lives. Once you're in this fight, it changes you, makes it hard to walk away." Ethan didn't respond because he didn't have a good answer. Part of him knew she was right. Part of him was already feeling that old pull, the clarity of purpose, the straightforward morality of hunting truly evil people. It was seductive in its simplicity. They headed back inside where the afternoon session focused on tactical planning. Agent Reeves laid out 3 priority targets: the safe house in Tucson, a coordination center in Las Vegas, and a warehouse facility in Phoenix that appeared to be a hub for moving women between locations. "We want to hit all 3 simultaneously," she explained. "Coordinated raids, maximum surprise, minimal opportunity for them to destroy evidence or harm victims." "That's ambitious," Ethan said, studying the building layouts she'd pulled up. "You're talking about 3 separate tactical operations across multiple jurisdictions, perfect timing and communication, all while prioritizing victim safety. Which is why we need your input. You've planned and executed complex multi-target operations before." Ethan moved to the display screen, examining each location carefully. The Tucson house was residential, suburban neighborhood, neighbors close by. Risky for a raid, but also risky for them to use. The Las Vegas location was an office building downtown, 7th floor, limited access points. The Phoenix warehouse was industrial area, isolated, multiple entrances and exits. "The warehouse is your primary threat," he said after a moment. "It's got the space and isolation for them to have serious security. Armed guards, surveillance, possibly hostages held on site. The other two locations are going to be more administrative, less defended. Our intelligence suggests the warehouse is mainly used for storage and logistics, Agent Chen said. Your intelligence could be wrong or outdated. These people just lost their street team and they know you're coming. Where would you beef up security if you were them? The question hung in the air. Agent Reeves exchanged glances with Chen. The place with the most to hide, she said slowly. The warehouse. Exactly. You hit that location first, hard and fast, with overwhelming force. Use the other two as secondary operations once you've secured the primary target. Ethan pointed to the warehouse schematic. Here's your problem, though. Multiple exits. They can scatter in 6 different directions. You need blocking positions, coordinated entry teams, and probably aerial support to track runners. We have access to Bureau helicopters, Reeves said. Good. You'll need them. What about entry tools, breaching equipment? Full tactical package. We can bring in the FBI's Critical Incident Response Group if needed. Ethan nodded, his mind working through scenarios. Timing is critical. You want to hit between 2 and 4 a.m. when alertness is lowest, but you also need to account for victim safety. If there are women being held there, they're going to be terrified when armed agents come through the doors. You need translators, female agents, medical personnel standing by. We have protocols for victim recovery, Agent Chen assured him. Protocols are fine until the first shot is fired. Then everything goes to hell. Ethan had seen too many operations fall apart when reality didn't match the plan. You need contingencies for if they resist, for if they try to use victims as shields, for if the whole thing turns into a hostage situation. The tactical discussion continued for another 2 hours, Ethan drawing on years of experience planning complex operations. It felt disturbingly natural, slipping back into this mindset, thinking about angles of approach, fields of fire, threat assessment. This was what he had done for over a decade, and muscle memory ran deep. By late afternoon, they had the skeleton of a plan. 3 coordinated raids, Phoenix Warehouse as primary target, 48 to 72 hours to finalize operational details and stage resources. We move Friday night, Agent Reeves decided. That gives us time to coordinate with local SWAT teams, position assets, and confirm our intelligence. I want to do a physical reconnaissance of the warehouse, Ethan said. Drive by at minimum, preferably get eyes on from a distance. I don't trust schematics and satellite imagery. I'll arrange it, Agent Chen said. Tomorrow morning? Works for me. As the meeting broke up, Admiral Brennan pulled Ethan aside. How are you holding up? Fine, sir. This is familiar territory. That's what concerns me. I don't want you to lose yourself in this, Ethan. You have a daughter to go home to. I'm aware of that, Admiral. Are you? Because I've seen good men get pulled back into the operational mindset and forget they're not invincible anymore. They're not 25 and backed by an entire task force. They're fathers with responsibilities. Ethan met the Admiral's eyes. With respect, sir, I know exactly who I am and what I'm risking. But these women being trafficked, they're somebody's daughters too. Brennan nodded slowly. Just remember your priorities. We'll find another way if this becomes too much. Understood. Ethan left the federal building as the sun was beginning its descent, painting the Phoenix sky in shades of orange and purple. He drove home on autopilot, his mind still running through tactical scenarios and threat assessments. Mrs. Chen met him at the door, Maya bouncing excitedly beside her. Daddy, we made chocolate chip cookies! That's great, baby. He hugged her, breathing in the scent of sugar and childhood innocence. A stark contrast to the darkness he'd been immersed in all day. Everything go okay? Mrs. Chen asked quietly while Maya ran to get the cookies. Yeah, just some consulting work. Might be doing it for a while. Well, you know I'm happy to help with Maya whenever you need. She's a delight. After Mrs. Chen left, Ethan and Maya sat at the kitchen table eating cookies and going through her homework. She chattered about her day at school, about the friend drama in her second-grade class, about the upcoming school play where she desperately wanted to be a tree. Normal. Simple. Good. But Ethan couldn't fully engage. Part of his mind was still in that conference room, still planning raids and assessing threats. He hated that he was split like this, not fully present for his daughter because he was mentally preparing for violence. Daddy, Are you listening? Maya asked, pulling him back. Sorry, sweetheart. I'm listening now. Tell me again about the tree costume. That night, after Maya was in bed, Ethan sat at his laptop reviewing the files Agent Reeves had sent him. Surveillance photos of known associates, financial transactions that suggested money laundering, testimonies from recovered victims that detailed the scope of the operation's brutality. One testimony in particular caught his attention. A 19-year-old from Romania named Elena, who'd been promised work as a nanny, only to have her passport seized and be forced into prostitution. She described being held in what sounded like the Phoenix warehouse, guarded by armed men, subjected to systematic abuse and dehumanization. The clinical language of the report couldn't hide the horror. Ethan found his hands shaking with rage as he read, imagining if it had been Claire, if it had been, he couldn't even let himself think it, if it had been Maya someday. His phone rang. Mike Chen. You surviving your first day back in the game? Mike asked without preamble. It's not the game, it's consulting. Right, and I'm sure you spent all day drinking coffee and giving gentle suggestions. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. How'd you know about the coffee? I've met you, so what's the real situation? Ethan gave him the overview, the scope of the trafficking network, the planned raids, the timeline. Mike listened without interrupting, processing it all with the tactical mind of someone who'd spent 20 years in special operations. You're going to need backup, Mike said when Ethan finished. I've got the entire federal task force. I mean real backup. Someone who knows how you think, who can watch your six when things get complicated. Federal agents are great at their job, but they're not operators. You offering? I'm retired too, remember? But I know some guys who do private security work. Good guys, former teams, they could be available for protective detail or tactical support if needed. Ethan considered it. Having someone he trusted implicitly on standby wasn't a bad idea, especially if Maya needed security beyond what the government was providing. Let me think about it. Right now, the plan is for me to stay in an advisory role. Plans change. Just keep it in mind. After they hung up, Ethan walked through his house, checking locks and security as had become his nightly habit. The text threats from Saturday still nagged at him. He'd reported them to Agent Reeves, who'd assured him they were monitoring his home and phone, but that didn't make him feel much better. He paused at Maya's door, watching her sleep. She looked so small, so vulnerable. The idea that violence could reach her because of choices he'd made was intolerable. I won't let anything happen to you, he whispered. I promise. Tuesday morning came too early. Ethan was up at 5, running 6 miles through his neighborhood as the sun rose, trying to burn off the restless energy that hummed through his system. He hadn't slept well, too much coffee, too many scenarios running through his head. By 8, he was dressed and ready when Agent Chen picked him up for the warehouse reconnaissance. They drove in an unmarked sedan, Chen behind the wheel, both of them alert but casual. Did some more digging on our 3 suspects, Chen said as they navigated morning traffic. Volkov's talking a lot, but most of it's low-level stuff. He's trying to trade information for a lighter sentence, but he genuinely doesn't seem to know much about the higher levels of the organization. Compartmentalization, Ethan observed. Good operational security. The street guys only know what they need to know. Exactly. But Mendez, the heavy guy you took down, he's a different story. Turns out he was former Mexican Special Forces, but not just any unit. He was with GAF before they became the Zetas. Ethan whistled low. The Zetas were one of the most brutal cartels in Mexico, and their roots in elite military units made them particularly dangerous. So we're potentially dealing with cartel connections, Ethan said. Looks that way, which changes the threat assessment significantly. They drove into the industrial area where the warehouse was located, a sprawling complex of metal buildings and shipping containers. Chen slowed the car, both of them scanning the area with practiced eyes. The warehouse itself was a large corrugated metal structure, maybe 15,000 square feet. Loading docks on one side, offices on the other. Fencing around the perimeter, but not particularly secure. A few cars in the parking lot could be legitimate business or could be security. Drive past slowly, Ethan said. I want to see the sight lines. Chen complied, and Ethan noted everything. Camera positions, entry points, the condition of the fence, nearby buildings that could provide overwatch positions. His mind automatically cataloged it all. building a three-dimensional tactical map. There, he said quietly, pointing to a van parked near the loading dock. That's out of place. Wrong type of vehicle for this kind of facility. Could be legitimate delivery. Could be. Or it could be their security watching for surveillance. Ethan pulled out his phone, taking a few casual pictures as they drove past. We need to establish a pattern of life. See who comes and goes, when the shifts change, what kind of traffic the place gets. We've had intermittent surveillance, but resources are stretched thin. Then we make time. This place is too important to go in blind. They circled the area twice more, approaching from different angles, before Chen pulled into a strip mall parking lot half a mile away. From here, they had a decent view of the warehouse entrance through binoculars. How long do you want to sit here? Chen asked. As long as it takes to see something useful. They ended up spending 3 hours watching the warehouse. During that time, they saw 2 deliveries, both appearing legitimate. A shift change around 11, where 4 men left and 3 different men arrived. All of them moved with a particular awareness that suggested they were more than warehouse workers. Ex-military or ex-law enforcement, Ethan murmured, watching through the binoculars. Look at the way they scan the area. That's tactical awareness. You think they're expecting us? I think they're always expecting someone. That's how you stay in business in this kind of work. Around noon, a black Escalade pulled up to the warehouse. 2 men got out, both wearing expensive suits, both moving with the confidence of people who expected deference. The warehouse workers immediately straightened up, body language shifting to something between respect and fear. Management, Chen said, already taking pictures with a telephoto lens. Ethan studied the 2 men carefully. One was tall, maybe 6'2", Anglo, gray hair, cut military short. The other was Hispanic, shorter but broader, moving with the fluid grace of someone who knew how to handle himself in a fight. Run those faces through your database, Ethan said. Those aren't street-level guys. They watched as the 2 men entered the warehouse, stayed for about 40 minutes, then emerged and drove away in the Escalade. The entire visit had the feel of an inspection, leadership checking on their operation. This is bigger than we thought, Chen said quietly. Yeah, and more organized. Ethan lowered the binoculars. We need to accelerate the timeline. If they're doing inspections, they're probably getting ready to relocate or restructure. They drove back to the federal building, both of them quiet, processing what they'd seen. The operation wasn't just sophisticated, it was militarized. That meant the raid was going to be significantly more dangerous than initially assessed. Agent Reeves was waiting when they arrived, and her expression was grim. We have a problem, she said without preamble. Volkov was found dead in his cell an hour ago. Apparent suicide. He hanged himself using a bedsheet. The words hit like a physical blow. Ethan's mind immediately went tactical. That's not suicide, he said flatly. That's elimination of a witness. We're investigating, but preliminary assessment agrees with you. Someone got to him inside the detention facility. Which means they have reach inside the system, Agent Chen added. Corrections officers on payroll or enough fear that someone helped him die to send a message. Ethan paced the room, thinking through implications. They're cleaning house, getting rid of anyone who might talk. Mendez and Patterson are in danger. Already moved them to secure federal holding, Reeves said. Isolated cells, enhanced monitoring. But you're right. If they could get to Volkov, they can get to the others. We need to move faster, Ethan said. Every hour we wait gives them time to adapt, to eliminate evidence, to hurt more people. We move Friday as planned, Reeves insisted. We need the coordination, the resources in place. Friday might be too late. It has to be enough time because that's what we have. Her voice was sharp with stress and frustration. I understand your urgency, Ethan, but we do this by the book, or we risk the entire prosecution. Ethan bit back his response. She was right from a legal standpoint, but every operational instinct screamed that they were losing the initiative. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, then decided to answer. Ethan Ward. Mr. Ward. The voice was male, cultured, with a faint accent Ethan couldn't quite place. We need to talk about your recent activities. Every muscle in Ethan's body tensed. He gestured sharply at Agent Reeves, pointing to his phone. She immediately moved to start a trace. Who is this? Ethan kept his voice calm, neutral. Someone who appreciates talent when he sees it. What you did Saturday was impressive. Former SEAL, I understand? DevGru, no less. Quite a pedigree. You seem to know a lot about me. I know everything about you, Mr. Ward. I know about Maya. Second grade at Desert Vista Elementary. Plays soccer on Saturdays. Has Mrs. Henderson for her teacher. Sweet girl. Beautiful, like her mother was. The threat was explicit now. Ethan's hand tightened on the phone so hard the plastic creaked. If you touch my daughter, please. Threats are so crude. I'm calling to offer you an opportunity. You've interfered in our business, yes, but you've also demonstrated capabilities we could use. Walk away from this federal investigation. Take your daughter somewhere safe. In return, we forget about the unpleasantness in the parking lot. And if I refuse, then we'll be forced to demonstrate that no one is beyond our reach. Not you, not your daughter, not the pretty lieutenant you saved. The voice remained calm, almost pleasant. You have until Friday to decide. Walk away or watch everything you love disappear. The line went dead. Ethan stood frozen, the phone still pressed to his ear, rage and fear warring inside him. Agent Reeves was already on her radio, coordinating enhanced protection for Maya's school. Trace didn't complete, Chen said, frustrated. Burner phone, probably already destroyed. They just threatened my daughter, Ethan said, his voice deadly quiet. They threatened Maya directly. We'll protect her, Reeves promised. Round-the-clock security, agents at the school. That's not enough. Ethan's mind was racing now, tactical scenarios playing out. They're trying to scare me off, which means I'm a threat they can't easily eliminate. But Maya's vulnerable. The school, my home, anywhere she goes, she's exposed. What are you suggesting? Ethan met her eyes. I'm suggesting we don't wait until Friday. We hit them tomorrow night, hard, fast, and without warning. We take away their ability to retaliate. That's 48 hours to coordinate 3 simultaneous tactical operations across multiple jurisdictions, Chen protested. It's too fast. It has to be fast because they're moving against us right now. Volkov's dead. My daughter's been threatened. They're accelerating their timeline, so we accelerate ours. Reeves studied him for a long moment, then nodded sharply. All right, we move tomorrow. But Ethan, your daughter needs to be somewhere they can't find her until this is over. I know exactly where she needs to be. 2 hours later, Ethan sat across from Mike Chen in a quiet coffee shop, explaining the situation. I need you to take Maya somewhere off the grid, Ethan said, somewhere these people can't find her, and I need you to keep her safe until this is done. Mike didn't hesitate. I've got a cabin in the Mogollon Rim. Remote, no records tying it to me, good defensive position. I can have her there by tonight with enough security to hold off a small army. They threatened her, Mike. Specifically. By name. Then they just made a fatal mistake. You don't threaten a warrior's kid and expect him to back down. Mike's expression was hard. We'll keep her safe, Ethan. I promise you that. I need to tell her something. She's 7. She won't understand operational security or tactical necessity. She'll just know her dad is sending her away. Tell her the truth. That you're protecting her. That you'll come back. Kids are tougher than we give them credit for. That evening, Ethan sat Maya down at their kitchen table and tried to find words for an impossible conversation. Baby, I need you to go on a little trip with Uncle Mike, he began. Maya's face immediately crumpled. Why? Did I do something wrong? No, sweetheart, not at all. But the work I'm doing, the helping people work, it's gotten a little complicated, and I need to know you're safe while I finish it. How long? Just a few days. A week at most. Tears welled in her eyes. You promised you wouldn't leave me. The words cut deeper than any knife. Ethan pulled her into his lap, holding her tight. I'm not leaving you. I'm keeping you safe. There's a difference. And Uncle Mike is going to take you somewhere really fun. A cabin in the mountains with a lake and everything. I don't want to go to a cabin. I want to stay with you. I know you do. But sometimes being brave means doing the hard thing even when we don't want to. He pulled back so he could see her face. Remember when Mommy was sick and you had to be so brave? She nodded, wiping her eyes. This is like that. I need you to be brave for just a little while. Can you do that for me? Maya was quiet for a long moment, then nodded again. Will you call me? Every single day. I promise. An hour later, Ethan watched Mike drive away with Maya in the back seat, her small face pressed against the window, one hand raised in goodbye. The image burned into his memory. His daughter's frightened eyes, the trust she had in him even when he was sending her away. He stood in his empty driveway long after the taillights disappeared, feeling the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. Then he turned and went inside to prepare for war. Because they'd threatened his daughter, and that was a mistake they would not survive. The house felt wrong without Maya in it. Ethan stood in her bedroom doorway at 11 p.m., staring at the empty bed with its carefully arranged stuffed animals, and felt the absence like a physical ache. Her nightlight still glowed softly in the corner, casting familiar shadows that now seemed hollow and accusing. He'd sent his daughter away to keep her safe, but the cost of that safety was written in every quiet corner of the house. His phone buzzed with a text from Mike. Arrived safely. She's asleep. Called for you twice but settled down. She's strong, Ward, like her old man. Ethan typed back, thank you, stay vigilant, always. He pocketed the phone and forced himself to move, to shift mental gears from grieving father to tactical operator. The mission brief was in 6 hours. The raids would commence in 30. Between now and then, he needed to be sharp, focused, and completely committed to the operation. Maya was safe with Mike. That had to be enough. Ethan walked to his bedroom and opened the gun safe. The Sig Sauer P226 lay there alongside his old tactical gear, items he'd promised himself he'd never need again. He lifted the pistol, checked the action with muscle memory that hadn't faded despite 3 years away from combat. The weight was familiar, almost comforting. He loaded 3 magazines, chambered around, and set it on his nightstand. Then he lay down fully clothed on top of his bed, hands folded on his chest, eyes on the ceiling. He didn't expect to sleep. Instead, he ran through mental rehearsals of the next day's operation, visualizing every possible scenario, every potential complication. It was a meditation of violence, preparing his mind and body for what was coming. At some point near dawn, he must have dozed because he jerked awake to his alarm at 5 a.m., heart pounding, hand reaching for the weapon before his conscious mind fully engaged. The dream fragments scattered, something about Maya calling for him from somewhere he couldn't reach, and he pushed them away ruthlessly. Shower, coffee, gear check. The morning routine of a man preparing for combat. By 6:30, he was at the federal building. The conference room was already full of people. FBI tactical teams, HSI agents, local SWAT commanders, intelligence analysts. The energy was tense, focused, everyone aware that the timeline had been compressed and the stakes raised. Agent Reeves stood at the front of the room, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd slept as little as Ethan. Listen up, everyone. We're moving the operation forward by 48 hours due to credible threats against key personnel and the death of a material witness. That means some of you are getting briefed on this for the first time right now. Pay attention, because we only get one shot at this. She pulled up a map showing all 3 target locations: Phoenix Warehouse, Tucson Residential, Las Vegas Office Building. Simultaneous raids 0300 hours tonight. Phoenix is primary target. That's where we believe they're holding victims and where leadership may be on site. Tucson and Vegas are secondary, likely administrative and coordination sites. Commander Hayes took over, pulling up tactical schematics. Phoenix team will be led by FBI SWAT with support from HSI Tactical. Tucson and Vegas operations will be coordinated by local FBI field offices with oversight from the task force. Rules of engagement are standard: announce, identify, secure. But be aware that intelligence suggests these sites may have armed security with military backgrounds. A SWAT commander Ethan didn't recognize raised his hand. What's the civilian consultant's role in this? All eyes turned to Ethan. He stood, feeling the weight of their assessment. Most of these men and women were professionals, experienced in tactical operations. They didn't know him, didn't trust him, and probably resented having an outsider involved in their operation. I'm here to provide specialized knowledge on how our targets think and operate, Ethan said evenly. Many of them have military or paramilitary backgrounds. I've spent 12 years learning how to predict and counter that kind of opposition. Agent Reeves has final tactical authority, but I'm available to consult on approach, threat assessment, and adaptive responses if things don't go according to plan. Have you been briefed on federal arrest procedures? Another agent asked, skepticism clear in his voice. I have. I'm also aware that I have no arrest authority and limited rules of engagement. I'm here to help you do your jobs more effectively, not to take over. Agent Chen spoke up from the back of the room. For those who don't know, Mr. Ward is the one who took down the 3 suspects that started this investigation. He did it in under 15 seconds, unarmed, while protecting a civilian. His tactical assessment has already improved our operational planning significantly. I suggest we listen to what he has to say. The room settled slightly, though Ethan could still feel the undercurrent of doubt. That was fine. He didn't need their trust, just their competence. The briefing continued for another 90 minutes, going over entry sequences, communication protocols, medical support, and contingency plans. Ethan listened carefully, identifying potential weaknesses in the plan and noting them for later discussion with Reeves. When the formal briefing ended and teams dispersed to prepare equipment and coordinate logistics, Ethan approached Reeves at the front of the room. Your SWAT team is good, he said quietly, but they're planning this like a standard building entry. That warehouse isn't standard. What are you seeing that they're not? They're assuming resistance will be at entry points, doors, windows, obvious access. But if I were running security for a trafficking operation in that building, I'd have secondary defensive positions deeper inside. Choke points, kill zones, places where an assault team gets funneled into a disadvantageous position. Reeves studied the warehouse schematic again. You think they've fortified the interior? I think they're professionals who've been doing this for years and who know law enforcement tactics. They'll have contingencies. Ethan pointed to the warehouse layout. Here, where the main floor opens into the office section. That's a natural bottleneck. Perfect place for a defensive position. And here, where the loading dock connects to the storage area. If they're smart, they've got reinforced positions covering those transitional spaces. So what do you recommend? Multiple simultaneous entry points. Don't give them a single axis to defend. Hit them from 3 directions at once. Main entrance, loading dock, and secondary access through the office section. Overwhelm their ability to coordinate a defense. That spreads our forces thin. Less thin than getting bottlenecked in a kill zone. Ethan met her eyes. I've been on both sides of this kind of operation. Trust me, surprise and speed are your best assets. The moment they understand what's happening, the moment they can organize a coordinated response, people start dying. Reeves was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'll brief the SWAT commander on adjusting the entry plan. What else? Victim extraction. If there are women being held in that warehouse, the second we breach, they're going to be terrified. Possibly traumatized. Definitely not going to respond well to armed men in tactical gear shouting commands. You need a clearly identified extraction team, preferably including female agents, whose only job is to secure and evacuate victims. No dual-role assignments. Already planned for medical and victim services personnel. Good. One more thing. The 2 men we saw during reconnaissance yesterday. The ones in the Escalade. Did you get IDs on them? Reeves pulled up a file on her tablet. Facial recognition got hits. The Anglo male is Victor Konstantin, suspected Russian organized crime figure with ties to trafficking and money laundering. Multiple arrests, no convictions. Witnesses tend to disappear or recant. The Hispanic male is Eduardo Salazar, former Mexican federal police who went private security about 8 years ago. Also suspected cartel connections. Ethan studied the photos. Both men looked exactly like what they were. Dangerous professionals who'd survived in a brutal business by being smarter and more ruthless than their competitors. These men won't surrender easily, he said. They know what they're facing in prison. They'll fight. Then we'll be ready for that fight. The rest of the day blurred into preparation. Equipment checks, communications testing, coordination with medical teams and victim services. Ethan stayed close to the tactical planning, offering observations and suggestions when asked, staying silent when not. He could feel the SWAT team's initial skepticism gradually shifting to grudging respect as they realized his input was genuinely improving their operational plan. Around 4 p.m., Claire Brennan found him in the equipment room where he was helping inventory tactical medical supplies. Ethan, do you have a minute? They walked to an empty office. Claire closed the door and turned to face him, her expression serious. My father wanted me to tell you something, she said. After tonight, regardless of how it goes, you're done. No more operations, no more consulting. You walk away clean. That was always the deal. He also wanted me to say that if you feel compromised, if at any point you think your judgment is affected by the threats against Maya, no one will blame you for stepping back. Ethan's jaw tightened. Is that what you think? That I'm too emotionally invested to function? I think you're a father whose daughter was threatened by people we're about to raid. I think that would affect anyone's judgment. My judgment is fine. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you pushed to accelerate this operation after they threatened Maya. You're sending agents into a potentially lethal situation 12 hours after someone told you they'd hurt your daughter if you didn't back off. That's not tactical thinking, that's personal. The words stung because they contained truth. Ethan forced himself to take a breath, to consider objectively whether his desire to strike back was clouding his assessment of the operation. You're right, he admitted. It is personal. They made it personal when they went after my daughter, but that doesn't mean my tactical assessment is wrong. Every piece of intelligence we have suggests they're preparing to relocate or destroy evidence. Volkov's death proves they're cleaning house. We move now, or we lose the opportunity. And if it goes wrong, if people get hurt because we rushed, then that's on me. I'll carry that weight. But if we wait and more women disappear into their network because we were too cautious, that's a weight I can't carry. Claire studied his face for a long moment. You know what scares me? How much you sound like my father right now. That same absolute certainty that the mission comes first, that the cost is worth paying. Your father is a good man. My father is a great officer, but he spent 30 years making hard choices and living with the consequences. You walked away from that life. Are you sure you want to walk back into it? Before Ethan could answer, his phone rang. Mike Chen. Hold on, Ethan said to Claire, then answered. Everything okay? Maya's fine, asking for you, but fine. I'm calling because you need to know something. Mike's voice was tense. About an hour ago, a car drove past the access road to my cabin, slowed down, seemed to be looking for something, then kept going. Ethan's blood ran cold. Description? Dark sedan, couldn't get plates. Could be nothing. There are other cabins up here, but my instincts are pinging. Trust your instincts. Assume it's them. Go to full defensive protocols. Already there. I've got 2 other guys here now, both former teams, both fully armed. Anyone comes up that road with bad intentions, they're not getting through. But Ethan, if they found us this fast, their intelligence network is better than we thought. I know. Can you move locations? Not without potentially leading them to wherever we go. Right now this cabin is defensible and I know the terrain. We move. We're vulnerable during the transition. Ethan closed his eyes, forcing his tactical mind to override his panic. Mike was right. The cabin was a good defensive position. Moving now would create more risk than it solved. Stay put. Keep Maya inside and away from windows. I'll have Reeves coordinate with local law enforcement for backup if you need it. We won't need it, but appreciate the thought. Just finish your mission and come get your daughter. She misses you. After hanging up, Ethan relayed the information to Claire, who immediately got on her phone to coordinate enhanced security around Mike's location. They're good, Ethan said, more to himself than to Claire. Better than I anticipated. They found a location that's not in my name, that has no paper trail connecting it to me, in less than 24 hours. Which means they have resources, serious resources. Claire finished her call and looked at him grimly. Local sheriff's office is sending a patrol to the general area. They'll maintain visibility but won't approach the cabin unless called. Best we can do without compromising the location. It'll have to be enough. Ethan checked his watch. 7 p.m., 8 hours until the raids commenced. 8 hours of sitting and waiting while his daughter was in potential danger, and his mind churned through worst-case scenarios. The evening briefing at 9 p.m. was tense. Everyone was suited up now, tactical gear checked and rechecked, weapons loaded, communications tested. The SWAT commander ran through the final operation order, and Ethan was pleased to see his suggestions had been incorporated into the entry plan. Agent Reeves pulled Ethan aside as the briefing concluded. You're riding with the command vehicle. You'll have communications access to all 3 teams, but you stay in the vehicle unless I specifically call for you. Clear? Crystal. I mean it, Ethan. You're not an operator on this mission. You're a consultant who stays back and provides advice over the radio if needed. I understand the parameters. She studied him carefully. Do you? Because I've seen the look in your eyes today. You're not thinking like a consultant. You're thinking like someone about to go into combat. Old habits. Old habits get people killed when they override training and procedures. I need you focused and objective, not personally invested in looking for payback. Ethan met her gaze steadily. Agent Reeves, I spent 12 years conducting operations in hostile territory against enemies who wanted me dead. I know how to compartmentalize. I know how to set aside personal feelings and focus on the mission. That's not something you forget. I hope you're right. She glanced at her watch. We roll in 90 minutes. Get some coffee, check your gear, and be ready to move. The next hour and a half crawled by. Ethan forced himself to eat. Energy bars and water. Basic fuel for what might be a long night. He checked and rechecked his equipment, even though he wasn't supposed to need any of it. Tactical vest with plates, communications headset, medical kit, flashlight, and against all protocols, the Sig Sauer concealed in a hip holster under his jacket. If something went wrong, if the situation deteriorated and lives were at stake, he wanted options. At midnight, the convoy rolled out. 3 separate tactical teams heading to 3 separate targets, coordinated to hit simultaneously at 3 a.m. Ethan rode in the command vehicle with Agent Reeves, Commander Hayes, and the communications coordinator. The atmosphere was tense but controlled, everyone running through mental checklists and final preparations. The drive to the warehouse district took 20 minutes. They staged 2 blocks away in the parking lot of a closed industrial facility, maintaining radio silence as they waited for the other teams to report ready. Ethan watched the digital clock on the dashboard tick through the minutes. 2:30 a.m., 2:40, 2:50. Each team checking in. Tucson ready, Vegas ready, Phoenix ready. All teams, this is command, Reeves said into her radio. Stand by for synchronized assault. Time check on my mark. Mark, T-minus 10 minutes. The final countdown began. Ethan could feel his heart rate slowing, his breathing deepening, his body shifting into that pre-combat state he'd experienced hundreds of times. Time seemed to stretch, each second elastic and distinct. At 2:55, the tactical teams moved into final positions. Ethan watched on the command vehicle's monitors as helmet cameras showed different angles approaching the warehouse. 3 entry teams, main entrance, loading dock, office section. Exactly as he'd recommended. All teams, stand by, Reeves commanded. Execute on my mark in 3, 2, 1, mark. The synchronized assault began. On the monitors, Ethan watched as breaching charges blew door locks and entry teams flowed into the warehouse. Helmet cameras showed flashes of movement, shouted commands, the controlled chaos of a dynamic entry. FBI, get on the ground! Contact left! Contact left! Shots fired! The situation deteriorated in seconds. Gunfire erupted from multiple positions inside the warehouse, exactly where Ethan had predicted defensive positions would be. The entry teams took cover, returning fire, tactical discipline holding, but the element of surprise clearly lost. We've got armed resistance, multiple shooters. The SWAT commander's voice came through clipped and professional. Engaging now. All teams weapons free on armed hostile aisles. More gunfire. Through the fragmented helmet camera views, Ethan could see muzzle flashes from elevated positions, indicating the defenders had prepared firing platforms with good sight lines. Professional setup. Military-grade tactics. Alpha team is pinned down at the main entrance, one of the tactical leaders reported. Request support. Bravo team moving to flank, another voice responded. On the Tucson and Vegas channels, operations were proceeding more smoothly. Minimal resistance, suspects being taken into custody, buildings being cleared room by room. But Phoenix was turning into a firefight. Command, this is Alpha 1, the SWAT commander's voice cut through. We have visual on hostages. Multiple females appear to be restrained, located in the northwest corner of the main warehouse floor. We cannot safely extract while under fire from elevated positions. Reeves leaned forward, studying the monitors. Can you suppress the defensive positions? Negative. They've got overlapping fields of fire and hard cover. We try to push through, we'll take casualties and possibly endanger the hostages. Ethan could see the tactical problem immediately. The defenders had done exactly what he would have done, established mutually supporting positions that created a kill zone any assault team would have to cross. The entry teams were stuck, unable to advance without unacceptable risk. "We need to cut off their coordination," Ethan said quietly. "They're communicating somehow, radios or phones. If we jam their communications, they can't coordinate their defense effectively." "Already deployed communications jamming," the tech coordinator reported. "But it doesn't seem to be affecting their response." "Then they're using hardwired systems, intercoms or direct line-of-sight signals." Ethan studied the warehouse schematic displayed on one of the monitors. "There, the office section. That's their command and control. Take that out and their defensive coordination collapses." Reeves keyed her radio. "Bravo team, what's your status on the office section?" "Still clearing. We've encountered locked doors, possible barricaded positions. Slow going." "Expedite. That's their command center. Securing that is priority 1. "Copy that command." Minutes ticked by. On the monitors, Ethan watched the stalemate continue. Tactical teams holding positions, defenders maintaining their elevated positions, nobody able to gain decisive advantage. Every second that passed was another second for the defenders to potentially harm hostages or call for reinforcements. Then one of the helmet cameras showed a door in the office section being breached. Bravo team flowed through, weapons up, clearing corners with practiced efficiency. "Contact! Office section!" More gunfire. "One hostile down. 2 attempting to flee." The radio erupted with overlapping communications. Through the chaos, Ethan heard someone shout about a vehicle fleeing from the back of the warehouse. "Command! We've got runners! Black Escalade, 2 occupants, heading east on Industrial Boulevard." Constantine and Salazar. The leadership. They were escaping while their subordinates held off the assault teams. "Air support, do you have visual?" Reeves demanded. "Negative command, too many buildings, lost visual, vehicle heading toward Highway 60. Ethan felt the mission slipping away. They'd take down the defensive positions, they'd secure the hostages, they'd arrest the street-level operators. But the real targets, the leadership coordinating this entire network, were about to disappear. He made a decision. "I'm going after them," he said, already opening the command vehicle door. "Ward, stop!" Reeves shouted. "You're not authorized." "Those are the men running this operation. We lose them. This entire raid accomplishes nothing except taking out middle management." Ethan was already moving, pulling keys from his pocket for his truck parked nearby. "I'm not engaging, just tracking. I'll feed you their location." "Ethan, that's an order. Stand down!" But he was already in his truck, engine roaring to life, pulling out of the parking lot. Behind him, he heard Reeves cursing over the radio, but he didn't care. This was the choice point, the moment where you either seized opportunity or let it slip away. His truck accelerated through the industrial district, heading east. He spotted the Escalade 3 blocks ahead, moving fast but not recklessly, trying to blend into sparse late-night traffic. Ethan grabbed his radio. "Command, I have visual on the Escalade. Maintaining pursuit. They're heading east on Industrial, approaching Highway 60 interchange." "Ward, break off immediately!" Reeves's voice was furious. "You are not law enforcement. You have no pursuit authority." "I'm a civilian maintaining visual on suspects who just fled a crime scene. Spawn. Last I checked, that's not illegal. I'll keep you updated on their location so your authorized units can intercept." He kept his distance, two cars back, professional surveillance technique. The Escalade merged onto Highway 60 heading east, accelerating now, clearly aware they needed distance from the raid site. "They're on Highway 60 eastbound," Ethan reported. "Speed approximately 80 miles per hour, light traffic. Request intercept units." "Highway patrol is scrambling," Commander Hayes' voice cut in. "ETA to intercept 12 to 15 minutes. Can you maintain visual without being detected?" "Affirmative." The highway stretched out into darkness, Phoenix's lights falling away behind them. Ethan maintained his distance, keeping the Escalade in sight but not obviously tailing them. His mind raced through scenarios. Where would they go? Safe house, airport, border crossing? The Escalade took an exit near Apache Junction, heading into more rural territory. Bad news. Empty roads meant Ethan's pursuit would be obvious, but it also meant fewer escape options. He followed them off the highway, dropping back further now, using his headlights sparingly. The terrain was high desert, scattered development giving way to open space, and occasional clusters of buildings. The Escalade turned onto a dirt road leading toward a small industrial complex, old buildings, most looking abandoned. Ethan killed his lights and pulled over, watching from a distance. "Command, they've gone to ground. Location is..." He checked his GPS and relayed coordinates. "Appears to be an old industrial site, multiple buildings. I'm holding position approximately half a mile out." "Highway patrol is 15 minutes from your location," Hayes reported. "Local sheriff's department is closer. ETA 8 minutes. Maintain observation, but do not engage." "Copy that." Ethan grabbed binoculars from his truck and moved on foot toward a small rise that would give him a better vantage point. The Escalade had parked near one of the larger buildings, a corrugated metal structure similar to the warehouse they'd just raided. Through the binoculars, he watched as Constantine and Salazar exited the vehicle. They were moving urgently, but not panicked, talking on phones, gesturing toward the building. More than escaping, they were coordinating something. Then Ethan saw it. Another vehicle approaching from the opposite direction. Then another. 4 vehicles total, converging on this location. Men getting out, all armed, all moving with tactical precision. This wasn't a safe house. This was a rally point. They were consolidating forces, preparing for something. "Command, situation has changed," Ethan said urgently into his radio. "Multiple vehicles arriving at the location, approximately 15 to 20 armed individuals. This looks like they're organizing a counter-response." A long pause. Then Reeves's voice, tense. "Counter-response to what?" And then Ethan understood. The sick certainty hit him like a physical blow. They're going after the witnesses. Mendez and Patterson in federal holding, or... He didn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. The other target was obvious. Maya. His phone rang. Mike Chen. Ethan answered with shaking hands. "Ward, we've got movement on the access road. Multiple vehicles, tactical approach. This is it." "How many?" "Can't tell yet. At least 3 vehicles, maybe 10, 15 people." Mike's voice was calm, but Ethan could hear the tension underneath. "We're locked down, defensive positions established. But Ethan? Maya's scared. She knows something's wrong." Ethan closed his eyes, every instinct screaming at him to abandon this position, to race to his daughter. But he was 2 hours away. Even if he left right now, he wouldn't get there in time. "Mike, you have to hold them." "I know, we will. Just, when this is done, you come get your little girl." "I'm coming. I promise. I'm coming." The line went quiet, and Ethan stared at his phone, feeling utterly helpless. His daughter was in danger, and he was 100 miles away chasing suspects who'd probably orchestrated the whole thing as a diversion. "Command, they knew," Ethan said into the radio, his voice hollow. "The raid at the warehouse was expected. They sacrificed their operation there to protect the leadership and create an opportunity to eliminate threats. They're going after the witnesses and my daughter right now." "Local law enforcement is already responding to your friend's location," Hayes said. "Sheriff's Department, State Police, everyone we can scramble. They'll get there." But would they get there in time? Ethan stood on that desert ridge, torn between 2 impossible choices. Stay here and maintain surveillance on the leadership, or abandon the mission to race to his daughter's defense knowing he'd never arrive in time. The operator in him knew the answer. Trust your team. Trust Mike Chen, who'd kept him alive through a dozen firefights. Trust that Maya's protection was in capable hands. Stay on mission. Complete the objective. The father in him didn't care about any of that. He was running back to his truck when the first shot echoed across the desert, followed by a rapid succession of gunfire that could only mean one thing. The assault on Mike's cabin had begun. And Ethan Ward, who'd faced enemy fire in a dozen countries, who'd survived situations that killed better men, who'd never once hesitated in combat, stood frozen beside his truck, listening to distant gunfire and knowing his daughter was fighting for her life, while he was powerless to help her. The gunfire from the distant mountains cut through the night air like the shattering of everything Ethan held sacred. He stood beside his truck, phone pressed to his ear, listening to Mike Chen's breathing turn rapid and controlled, the breathing of a man in combat. "Contact front," Mike's voice came through sharp. 3 vehicles, approximately 12 hostiles, armed with automatic weapons. We're engaging. More gunfire crackled through the phone, and Ethan heard Maya screaming in the background. The sound tore through him like shrapnel, worse than any physical wound he'd ever sustained. "Keep her down. Keep her away from windows." Ethan shouted into the phone, knowing it was useless, knowing Mike already knew everything there was to know about protecting someone under fire. "She's secure in the interior bathroom with Ramirez," Mike said, his voice steady even as Ethan heard the distinctive crack of rifle fire. "We've got good positions, good fields of fire. They're not getting through, Ward. I promise you that." "Sheriff's Department is 3 minutes out," Commander Hayes' voice cut through on the radio. "State Police 6 minutes. Just hold on." 3 minutes. In combat, 3 minutes was an eternity. Ethan's mind flooded with memories of firefights that had been decided in seconds, of how quickly things could go catastrophically wrong when automatic weapons were involved. The professional part of his brain, the part trained through years of combat operations, knew he had to stay on mission. The leadership elements here at this industrial site were the key to dismantling the entire network. If they escaped, if they disappeared back into the shadows, everything they'd sacrificed tonight would be for nothing. But the father in him was screaming to move, to act, to do anything except stand here useless while his daughter was in danger. Agent Reeves's voice came through his radio, cutting through his paralysis. "Ward, I need you to focus. What's happening at your location?" Ethan forced himself to breathe, to compartmentalize, to function. The leadership elements are consolidating forces. Approximately 20 armed individuals now on site, preparing for something. Could be planning to flee, could be preparing for a counterattack. Highway patrol is 2 minutes from your location. SWAT is being redirected. ETA 20 minutes. Can you maintain surveillance? Through his binoculars, Ethan watched the activity around the building intensify. Men moving equipment, loading vehicles, the organized chaos of people preparing to either defend a position or abandon it. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. 2 of the men were pulling a commercial-grade jerry can from one of the vehicles, the kind used to transport large quantities of fuel. Another man emerged from the building carrying what looked like boxes of documents. "They're destroying evidence," Ethan said into the radio. "Planning to burn the building. Command, whatever's in there, records, computers, evidence, we're about to lose it all." A string of curses came through from Reeves. "Highway patrol needs to intercept before they torch it. Where are Constantine and Salazar?" Ethan scanned the area, finding the 2 leadership figures standing near the Escalade, deep in conversation. Constantine was on a phone, gesturing emphatically. Salazar was checking a weapon, his body language suggesting a man preparing for violence rather than flight. "They're still on site, but preparing to move. My assessment is they'll torch the building and scatter in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Then we're out of time." Ethan's phone vibrated with an incoming call even as Mike was still on the line. He glanced at the screen and his heart stopped. It was Maya's number, the phone he'd given her for emergencies only. "Mike, Maya's calling me." "Answer it. We're okay for the moment. They're regrouping after the first assault." Ethan switched lines, his hands shaking. "Maya, baby, are you okay?" "Daddy?" Her voice was small and terrified, barely audible over the residual ringing in his ears from the distant gunfire. "Daddy, there are bad men, and they have guns, and Uncle Mike is shooting, and I'm scared." "I know, baby. I know you're scared, but Uncle Mike is there, and he's going to keep you safe. You remember when I told you Uncle Mike was one of the bravest, strongest people I know?" "Yes." A sob caught in her throat. "He's not going to let anything happen to you, I promise. The police are almost there, and Uncle Mike and his friends are protecting you. You just need to stay where you are, stay quiet, and be brave for just a little bit longer." "When are you coming, Daddy? I want you here." The raw need in her voice was like a knife twisting in his chest. "I'm coming as fast as I can, sweetheart. But right now, I need you to do exactly what Uncle Mike tells you. Can you do that for me?" "Okay." Another sob. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, baby. So much. Now put Uncle Mike back on." There was fumbling, and then Mike's voice returned. "Ward, the Sheriff's Department just arrived. 4 vehicles, good tactical response. The hostiles are falling back. Looks like they're breaking contact." Relief flooded through Ethan so powerfully his knees nearly buckled. "She's okay? Maya's okay?" "She's safe. Scared, but safe. Not a scratch on her. We held them off until the cavalry arrived, and now they're in full retreat. Your daughter is one tough kid, Ward. She stayed calm the whole time, did everything we told her. Ethan found himself sitting on the ground beside his truck, adrenaline crash hitting him all at once. Maya was safe. The sheriff's department had arrived in time. Mike had held the line. "Thank you," Ethan managed, his voice rough. "Mike, don't. We both know you do the same for me. Now finish your mission and come get your little girl." The moment of relief was shattered by the sound of engines roaring to life at the industrial site. Ethan scrambled to his feet, raising the binoculars. The vehicles were moving, scattering in different directions. The building was already starting to smoke. They'd started the fire. "Command, they're rabbiting. Multiple vehicles fleeing in different directions. The building is on fire." "Highway patrol is on scene now," Hayes reported. "They're attempting to intercept." Ethan watched as 2 highway patrol vehicles screamed into the industrial site, lights flashing. One of the fleeing vehicles, a pickup truck, tried to ram through a patrol car. The impact sent both vehicles spinning, and armed men poured out of the truck, opening fire on the highway patrol officers. The night erupted into chaos. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness as a full-scale firefight broke out. Ethan could see the highway patrol officers taking cover behind their vehicles, returning fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. And through it all, the black Escalade with Constantine and Salazar was moving, taking advantage of the chaos to head in the opposite direction, away from the firefight, toward the open desert. They were going to escape. Ethan made a decision that he knew would either end his consulting contract or possibly his freedom. He drew his Sig Sauer, checked the chamber, and started moving toward the fleeing Escalade on foot. The terrain was rough, desert scrub and rocky ground, but it provided cover, and he knew how to move through it. The Escalade was following a dirt track that wound through the area, and Ethan's angle of approach would intersect with their route. He had maybe 30 seconds before they passed his position. His radio crackled. "Ward, what's your position?" Reeves sounded frantic. "Pursuing the leadership element on foot. They're attempting to flee during the firefight. Stand down. You are not authorized for pursuit or engagement." "Then authorize me." "That's not how this works." Ethan didn't respond. The Escalade was approaching his position, headlights cutting through the darkness. He moved to a position beside the dirt track, using a large boulder for cover, and waited. Everything slowed down. His breathing steadied. His hands were rock solid on the pistol. This was the space between heartbeats where operators lived, where time stretched and training took over. The Escalade roared past his position. Ethan stepped out from cover and fired 3 precise shots into the left rear tire. The tire exploded and the vehicle swerved, the driver fighting for control on the loose dirt. The Escalade fishtailed, nearly rolled, and finally came to rest nose first in a shallow ravine. Ethan was moving before the vehicle fully stopped, approaching from the passenger side rear, weapon up and ready. The doors flew open and both occupants emerged. Salazar from the driver's side, Constantine from the passenger side, both armed. "Federal agent, drop your weapons," Ethan shouted, the lie coming easily because it was the right tactical call to potentially make them hesitate. Salazar didn't hesitate. He came up shooting, automatic pistol spitting fire. Ethan dove behind the Escalade's rear quarter panel as bullets sparked off metal. He counted the shots, 8, 9, 10, then rolled out and fired twice. Both rounds caught Salazar's center mass and he went down hard. Constantine had circled around the front of the vehicle, trying to flank. Ethan saw the movement and adjusted, their weapons coming up simultaneously. For a frozen moment, they faced each other across the hood of the crashed Escalade, both armed, both professional enough to know that whoever fired first would likely be the only one to walk away. "You're good," Constantine said, his accented English calm despite the situation. "Very good. Former military, yes? Special operations?" "Drop the weapon," Ethan said. "It's over." "Over?" Constantine smiled without humor. This is just one operation. You think stopping us here changes anything? There are a dozen more networks, 100 more. We are a business that meets demand. You cannot arrest demand." "I can arrest you." "Can you? I see no badge, no backup, no authority. You are just a man with a gun, trying to be hero for a cause that will never end." Sirens were approaching in the distance. The cavalry was coming. Ethan just needed to keep Constantine talking for another minute, to de-escalate enough to take him alive. There's a young woman named Elena, Ethan said, keeping his voice level, his weapon steady. 19 years old, from Romania. She came here because you promised her a job as a nanny. You took her passport, locked her in a warehouse, and destroyed her life. That's not business. That's slavery. Something flickered across Constantine's face. Not remorse, but calculation. And how many girls like Elena does America destroy every day with its policies, its wars, its interference? You think you have moral high ground? You're just another soldier who follows orders and tells himself he is righteous. The difference is I'm not holding innocent people prisoner. No, you just kill them from drones and call it collateral damage. The sirens were closer now, less than a minute away. Constantine heard them too, and Ethan saw the moment when the man made his decision. His finger tightened on the trigger. Ethan fired first. A single shot that took Constantine in the right shoulder, spinning him around and sending his weapon flying. The Russian went down hard, cursing in his native language, clutching his shoulder. Ethan moved quickly, kicking Constantine's weapon away, checking Salazar, who was unconscious but breathing. The ballistic vest under his jacket had absorbed most of the impact. Both men were neutralized, alive, and would face justice. Highway patrol vehicles screamed into the area, officers pouring out with weapons drawn, shouting commands. Ethan immediately dropped his weapon and raised his hands, knowing how this looked, knowing he'd just created a massive legal and procedural nightmare. I'm Ethan Ward, civilian consultant with FBI Task Force, he called out. These are suspects in a federal trafficking investigation. I've engaged them after they fled the primary raid site and opened fire on law enforcement. The officers swarmed him, patting him down, securing his weapon, running through their procedures. Within minutes, Agent Reeves arrived on scene, her face a mixture of fury and relief. Are you insane? She hissed at him. Do you have any idea how much trouble you're in? Constantine and Salazar are in custody, Ethan said simply. Alive. Ready to be prosecuted. You engaged armed suspects without authorization. You pursued fleeing vehicles. You discharged a weapon at suspects when you have no law enforcement authority. The legal team is going to have a field day with this. But they're in custody. Reeves glared at him for a long moment, then her expression softened fractionally. Admiral Brennan is going to have my head for letting you anywhere near this operation. Tell him I went rogue. Tell him I violated orders. He can end my contract immediately. I don't care. Ethan met her eyes. My daughter is safe. Those 2 men are in custody. 9 women were recovered from the warehouse. That's what matters. You're right, Reeves said quietly, and I'll go to bat for you with the review board. But Ethan, this was the last time. No more operations. No more consulting. You walk away from this life before it kills you or destroys what you're fighting to protect. The next hours blurred together in a haze of statements, debriefings, and legal consultations. By the time dawn broke over the Arizona desert, Ethan was emotionally and physically exhausted. The 3 raids had been successful, 17 arrests total, 9 victims recovered from the Phoenix warehouse. Extensive evidence seized before the industrial site was completely destroyed by fire. Constantine had been rushed to surgery and was expected to survive. Salazar had a concussion but was already in federal custody. Mendez and Patterson remained safe in protective custody. The network's leadership was broken. But it was the phone call at 7 a.m. that finally let Ethan breathe. Daddy? Maya's voice came through, stronger now, more herself. Hey, baby, I heard you were really brave last night. Uncle Mike said I was the bravest person he'd ever met. Is that true? Ethan's throat was tight. It's absolutely true. I'm so proud of you. When are you coming to get me? I'm getting in my truck right now. I'll be there in 2 hours. I love you, sweetheart. I love you too, Daddy. Hurry. The drive to Mike's cabin was the longest 2 hours of Ethan's life. He pushed the speed limit, his mind replaying everything that had happened, everything that could have gone wrong. Maya had been safe, but only barely. The sheriff's department had arrived just in time. But what if they hadn't? What if Mike's defensive position had failed? What if... He forced the thoughts away. Maya was safe. That was the reality he needed to focus on. The cabin appeared through the pine trees like a sanctuary. Mike was sitting on the front porch, and when Ethan's truck pulled up, the door flew open and Maya came running out, her small legs pumping, her face bright with relief and joy. Ethan was out of the truck before it fully stopped, dropping to his knees, and Maya crashed into him with enough force to nearly knock him over. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her so tight she squeaked in protest, but he couldn't make himself let go. "I'm here, baby. I'm here. I've got you." "You came back. You promised, and you came back." "Always. I'll always come back to you." Mike approached slowly, giving them space. When Ethan finally looked up, his old team leader had tears in his eyes. 17 arrests, Mike said quietly. 9 women rescued. Complete dismantlement of a major trafficking network. Hell of a mission, Ward. They came after her, Mike. They came after my daughter. And we stopped them. That's what matters. You did the right thing. It was the hard thing, but it was right. Ethan stood, lifting Maya into his arms, even though she was getting too big to carry easily. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face against his shoulder, and he felt her small body finally relax, the tension draining away now that her father was here. "Thank you," Ethan said to Mike, "for keeping her safe, for being there when I couldn't be. That's what brothers do." Mike clapped him on the shoulder. "Now get your daughter home. Feed her breakfast. Let her be a kid again. You've earned that." The drive home was quiet. Maya dozed against his shoulder, exhausted from the trauma and fear of the past night. Ethan drove carefully, one hand on the wheel, the other holding his daughter's small hand. Back in Phoenix, the city was waking up to a normal Thursday morning. People going to work, kids going to school, the ordinary rhythm of life continuing without any awareness of the darkness that had been pushed back during the night. Home had never looked better. Ethan carried Maya inside, settling her on the couch with blankets and her favorite stuffed animals. He made her pancakes, the chocolate chip ones she loved, and they ate together in comfortable silence. "Daddy?" Maya asked around a mouthful of pancake. "Are the bad men gone now?" "Yeah, baby, they're gone. The police have them, and they're going to be in jail for a very long time." "So we're safe?" "We're safe." She nodded, satisfied with this answer, and went back to her pancakes. For her, it was that simple. The bad men were gone, her father was here, and therefore everything was okay. If only it were that simple for him. Over the next several days, Ethan lived in a strange limbo between his civilian life and the operational world he'd briefly re-entered. Maya went back to school, hesitantly at first, but with the resilience of children, she gradually returned to her normal routine. The nightmares came occasionally. She'd wake up crying, asking for him, needing reassurance that he was there, but they became less frequent as the days passed. For Ethan, the integration was harder. He'd been back in operational mode for less than a week, but it had awakened something in him that he'd thought he'd successfully buried. The clarity of purpose, the straightforward morality of hunting truly evil people, the sense of doing something that mattered. It was seductive in a way that normal civilian life couldn't match. On Monday, Admiral Brennan requested a meeting. They met at a small coffee shop far from any government building, 2 men in casual clothes having what looked like a normal conversation. "The review board has cleared you of any misconduct," Brennan said without preamble. "Technically, you violated numerous protocols and procedures. Practically, you saved the operation and brought in the primary targets alive. The U.S. Attorney is thrilled to have Constantine and Salazar in custody, rather than dead or disappeared." "So I'm not being charged with anything?" "Oh, you're being charged with being a pain in my ass," Brennan said, but there was warmth in his voice. "But legally? No. You're clear. Your contract is fulfilled, and with the gratitude of everyone involved." Ethan nodded slowly. This was what he'd wanted, to be done, to walk away, to return to his life with Maya. So why did it feel hollow? "The network is broken," Brennan continued. "Constantine is cooperating to avoid harsher charges. He's given us names, locations, financial records. We're executing follow-up operations in 5 states and coordinating with international partners. It's not over, but we've dealt them a blow they won't recover from anytime soon." "How many women have been recovered total?" 23 so far, with more likely as we continue investigations. Every single one of them is alive because of what you did. Because you stepped in when you saw someone in danger. Because you refused to walk away when it got difficult." Ethan stared into his coffee. 23 women. 23 lives saved. He should feel triumphant, satisfied, proud. Instead, he just felt tired. My daughter asked me this morning if I was going to leave again, he said quietly. If the bad men would come back and I'd have to go away. She's 7 years old and she's asking me if I'm going to abandon her to fight bad guys. What did you tell her? I told her no, that I'm staying home, that the fighting is done. Brennan was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. Ethan, I want to tell you something. I've been in the Navy for 33 years. I've commanded men in combat. I've made life and death decisions that affected thousands of people. And I thought I understood the weight of command, the cost of service. Then my daughter was almost taken from me. In that moment, all my years of service, all my rank and authority, none of it mattered. All that mattered was that she was in danger, and I was powerless. Then you understand why I need to walk away. I understand why you think you need to. But I also understand something else. You can't walk away from who you are. You're a protector, Ethan. It's not just what you did for 12 years in the Navy, it's who you are at your core. The question isn't whether you'll continue protecting people. The question is how. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that there's a middle path, one where you don't have to choose between being Maya's father and using your abilities to make the world safer. Have you heard of the Counter-Trafficking Training Initiative? Ethan shook his head. It's a program that works with former military and law enforcement personnel, training them to provide security and protective services for anti-trafficking operations. Not field work, training, consultation, program development. Teaching the next generation of protectors how to think tactically about this problem. You're offering me a job. I'm offering you a way to use what you know to save lives without putting yourself in the line of fire every day. To be there for Maya while also doing work that matters. To find that balance between who you were and who you're trying to become. Ethan sat back, processing this, training others, building programs, using his experience to multiply his effectiveness without personally engaging in operations. It was appealing in a way he hadn't expected. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need. The offer stands whenever you're ready. Brennan stood, preparing to leave, then paused. One more thing. Claire wanted me to give you this. He handed Ethan an envelope. Inside was a handwritten note on simple paper. Ethan, thank you doesn't seem adequate for saving my life, but it's all I have. What you did required courage I can't fully comprehend. But more than that, it required you to risk everything you love for someone you didn't know. That's the definition of heroism. I hope you find peace with your choices, and I hope Maya knows how lucky she is to have a father like you. With gratitude always, Claire Ethan folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. Heroism. The word felt wrong. Heroes were supposed to feel good about their choices, weren't they? They weren't supposed to lie awake at night questioning every decision, wondering if there had been a better way. That evening, after Maya was asleep, Ethan sat in his backyard watching the stars emerge. The Phoenix night sky was never truly dark, too much light pollution, but if you looked carefully, you could still see the major constellations. His phone rang. Mike Chen. You surviving? Mike asked. Define surviving. Breathing, functioning, not completely losing your mind over what happened. Then yes, barely. Good, because I wanted to run something by you. Remember I mentioned those guys I know who do private security? Turns out 3 of them are former team members who are struggling with the transition to civilian life. They've got the skills, but not the direction. They need what you needed 3 years ago, purpose. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting you take that training program Brennan offered you, and I'm suggesting you bring in guys like us, operators who understand the work, who've done the job, who can teach from experience, build something real, something that matters. You talked to Brennan? I may have made some calls. Look, Ward, you can't go back to being just a dad who goes to parent-teacher conferences and bakes cookies. That's not who you are anymore. Maybe it never was, but you also can't be the operator who lives for the mission. So you find the middle ground. You build something that lets you be both. After they hung up, Ethan sat for a long time thinking about middle ground, about balance, about the space between the warrior he'd been and the father he wanted to be. Around midnight, he went to check on Maya one more time before bed. She was sleeping peacefully, her favorite stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest, her face relaxed and innocent. This was what he'd fought for, this moment of peace and safety. But he understood now that peace wasn't passive. It wasn't something you achieved once and kept forever. It was something you had to actively protect, every day, through countless small decisions and occasional large ones. The question Brennan and Mike had posed wasn't whether Ethan would continue fighting. It was how he would choose to fight. Would he do it reactively, waiting for crisis to pull him back in? Or would he do it proactively, on his own terms, in a way that let him be both protector and father? Standing in his daughter's doorway, watching her sleep, Ethan Ward made a decision. Not the easy decision, not the safe decision, but maybe, finally, the right decision. He would take the training position. He would build something that mattered. He would teach others how to fight this kind of darkness so that he didn't have to fight it alone. But he would do it in a way that let him be here for Maya, to see her grow up, to be present for the important moments, to be the father she deserved. The operator and the father didn't have to be separate people. They could be integrated, each part strengthening the other. The skills that made him effective in combat, discipline, planning, commitment, could make him effective as a father. And the love that drove him to protect his daughter could be the foundation for protecting others. It wouldn't be easy. There would be hard days, difficult choices, moments when the balance felt impossible to maintain. But for the first time since that Saturday afternoon in the parking lot, Ethan felt like he could see a path forward, a path that didn't require him to choose between the man he'd been and the man he wanted to become, a path that let him be both. He walked quietly into Maya's room and kissed her forehead, careful not to wake her. "I'm going to do better," he whispered. "I'm going to figure out how to keep you safe and keep the world a little bit safer too. I promise." Outside, the Phoenix night was quiet. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. Somewhere in the darkness, other victims were suffering, other traffickers were plotting, other evil was unfolding. The fight would never truly be over. But tonight, in this house, one little girl slept safely because her father had made hard choices and lived with the consequences. And tomorrow, Ethan Ward would begin building something that could multiply that safety, that protection, that small victory over darkness. Not as a warrior, not as just a father, but as both, integrated and whole, finding his way forward one difficult decision at a time. The mission wasn't over. It had just evolved into something more sustainable, more meaningful, more aligned with the man he was becoming. And that, finally, felt like peace. 6 months later, Ethan stood in front of a classroom of 20 former military personnel, all of them struggling with the same question he'd faced in that parking lot. How do you translate combat skills into protecting the innocent without losing yourself in the process? The training facility was located outside Scottsdale, a converted warehouse that bore no resemblance to the trafficking site they'd raided. Here, the space was filled with hope instead of darkness, purpose instead of exploitation. The walls displayed photos of successful operations, recovered victims who'd agreed to share their stories, and the faces of the team members who'd made it possible. Counter-trafficking work isn't about kicking down doors and shooting bad guys, Ethan said, pacing in front of the class. Though sometimes it includes that. It's about understanding systems, identifying vulnerabilities, and dismantling networks piece by piece. It's about patience, intelligence gathering, and building cases that actually hold up in court. A hand went up. The man was former Marine Corps, probably late 20s, with the restless energy of someone who missed the clarity of combat. "With respect, sir, that sounds like police work. We were operators. Why do they need us for this?" Ethan had asked himself the same question countless times. Because the people running these networks aren't street criminals. They're professionals. Many have military or paramilitary backgrounds. They think tactically, they plan operationally, and they understand security. To beat them, you need to think like them. That's where you come in. He pulled up a case study on the screen, a recent trafficking operation that had been disrupted in Nevada. This network moved 17 women across 3 states over 4 months. Standard law enforcement approaches failed repeatedly. You know why? Because the traffickers anticipated every move. They knew surveillance patterns. They knew arrest procedures. They understood the legal system's limitations. Another hand, this one from a former Army Ranger, older, with the weathered look of someone who'd done multiple combat tours. So how do you beat them? You outthink them. You use your training not to assault positions, but to identify weaknesses in their operational security. You apply the same planning skills you used in mission prep to building legal cases. You become the weapons that former operators like yourselves can't defend against, because you understand them completely. The class continued for another 2 hours, covering everything from behavioral analysis to evidence collection to trauma-informed victim interaction. Mike Chen co-taught, bringing his own experiences and perspective. 3 other former team members rounded out the instruction staff, each bringing specialized knowledge. When the session ended and the students filed out for their break, Claire Brennan appeared in the doorway. She visited occasionally, consulting on intelligence aspects of the training program. She'd been promoted to lieutenant commander and was now running anti-trafficking operations for naval intelligence across the southwestern United States. "That was good," she said, entering the classroom. "You're getting better at this, more confident." "I'm getting used to it," Ethan corrected. "Not sure I'll ever be confident standing in front of people talking instead of doing." "That's exactly what makes you effective. You're not some academic theorist. You're someone who's done the work, made the hard calls, lived with the consequences." She paused. "How's Maya?" "Good. Really good, actually. She's got a soccer game this afternoon that I'm leaving early for. 3rd grade championship." "You never miss those, do I understand correctly?" "Not a single one. That's the deal I made with myself. Training happens during school hours. Evenings and weekends belong to her. It's not always easy, but it's non-negotiable." Claire smiled. "My father says you've been turning down consulting requests from other agencies." "I have. This is my contribution. Training the next generation. I don't need to be in the field anymore." "Don't need to, or don't want to?" Ethan considered the question carefully. 6 months ago, he would have said both. Now, having found this middle path, the answer was more nuanced. "I miss it sometimes," he admitted. "The clarity, the direct action. But then I go home to Maya, help her with homework, listen to her talk about her day, and I remember why I chose this instead. She's only going to be young once. I can't get these years back." "That's very wise. Also very different from the man who pursued armed suspects through the desert without authorization. That man almost lost his daughter because he let the mission override everything else. I don't want to be him anymore." They walked together to the break room where Mike was already holding court with several students, telling war stories that were probably only half true, but entirely effective at building camaraderie. Admiral Brennan had funded the counter-trafficking training initiative through a combination of federal grants, private donations, and support from various law enforcement agencies. In 6 months, they'd trained over 80 personnel who'd gone on to support operations in 17 states. The results were measurable: more arrests, more victims recovered, more networks dismantled. But for Ethan, the real measure of success was simpler. Every evening, he went home to his daughter. Every weekend, they did normal family things. He'd attended every parent-teacher conference, every soccer game, every school play where Maya had finally gotten to be a tree. His phone buzzed with the text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who sometimes picked Maya up from school when Ethan's training schedule ran late. Today wasn't one of those days, but she was texting anyway. "Maya's at my house after school. She has something exciting to tell you, but wanted it to be a surprise. Don't ask her about it. Let her tell you when she's ready." Ethan smiled, typing back a quick acknowledgement. These small mysteries of childhood, the excitement over things adults might find mundane, the joy in sharing news on her own timeline, were precious. He'd almost missed all of this by staying stuck in operator mode. The afternoon session focused on legal frameworks and working with prosecutors. It was dry material but essential. Too many operations failed not because of tactical mistakes, but because evidence wasn't properly collected or chain of custody was broken. Ethan had brought in an assistant U.S. attorney who'd prosecuted dozens of trafficking cases, and she was walking the students through what made cases winnable. When training finally concluded at 3 p.m., Ethan drove straight to Maya's school. The soccer field was already filling with parents, the 3rd grade teams warming up in their mismatched uniforms. He spotted Maya immediately, number 7, her ponytail bouncing as she practiced dribbling with her friends. She saw him and her face lit up with that pure childhood joy that made everything else worthwhile. She ran over to the sideline. "Daddy, you came!" "Of course I came. Wouldn't miss it for anything. You ready to win this thing? We're going to destroy them." She said it with such fierce determination that Ethan had to suppress a laugh. Competitive spirit clearly ran in the family. "That's my girl. Go warm up. I'll be right here cheering." As she ran back to her team, another parent approached, Jeff Morrison, father of Maya's best friend Emma. They'd become friendly over the season, bonding over their daughter's friendship and their shared confusion about the complexities of third-grade social dynamics. "Ethan, good to see you. Heard you started some kind of training program?" "Yeah, working with veterans transitioning to civilian security work, keeping me busy." "That's great, man. Better than the consulting work you were doing before, I hope. Maya mentioned you were gone for a few days back in the fall. She was pretty worried about you." Ethan felt a familiar pang of guilt. Maya had been with Mike during that time, safe but separated from her father when she'd needed him most. The memory would probably haunt him forever. "This new work lets me be home every night," Ethan said. "That's what matters." The game started and Ethan lost himself in the simple pleasure of watching his daughter play. She was fearless on the field, diving for balls, defending aggressively, working with her teammates. When she scored the winning goal in the final minutes, the entire sideline erupted in cheers. Maya jumped up and down, her teammates mobbing her, pure happiness radiating from her small frame. This, Ethan thought, this is what I was protecting. Not some abstract concept of justice or freedom, but this specific moment of joy for this specific child. After the game, Maya was buzzing with excitement, talking nonstop about the goal, the game, her friends. They stopped for ice cream, a tradition after wins, and sat outside in the warm Arizona evening. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen said I shouldn't tell you my news yet, but I can't wait anymore," Maya said, chocolate ice cream smeared on her chin. "Okay, hit me with it." "We're doing a school project about heroes, real heroes, not superheroes, and I wrote about you. About how you saved that lady and helped catch bad guys. My teacher said it was really good, and she wants me to present it to the whole class." Ethan's throat tightened. He'd never told Maya the full details of what had happened, just the basic outline. He'd helped someone in danger, worked with police to catch criminals, and made sure bad people couldn't hurt anyone else. He'd deliberately downplayed his role, not wanting her to see him as some kind of action hero. "Baby, I'm not sure I'm the right person to write about for a hero project." "Why not? You saved people. You stopped bad guys. That's what heroes do. Heroes are people who do extraordinary things. I did what anyone should do when they see someone in trouble." Maya shook her head emphatically, her ponytail swishing. "That's not true. Mrs. Chen told me that lots of people saw that lady in trouble, but only you helped. She said that's what makes you a hero. You did something when everyone else didn't." Out of the mouths of children came truths that adults spent years trying to rationalize away. Ethan looked at his daughter, 7 years old, chocolate ice cream on her face, absolute certainty in her eyes, and felt something shift inside him. Maybe he had been a hero in that parking lot, not because he was special or extraordinary, but because he'd made the hard choice when it mattered. And maybe that was enough. "Okay," he said softly. "If you want to write about me for your project, that's okay. But remember, the real hero in all of this was the lady who fought back, who didn't give up, who helped the police even when she was scared, and all the other people working to make sure things like that don't happen again. Can I interview you for the project? Ask you questions?" "Absolutely. We'll do it this weekend." They finished their ice cream and headed home as the sun set, painting the Phoenix sky in shades of orange and purple. At home, Maya immediately started working on her project while Ethan made dinner. Spaghetti, her favorite. The domestic routine was comfortable, familiar, grounding. His phone rang while he was draining pasta. Mike Chen. "Got some news I thought you'd want to hear," Mike said. "Constantine just got sentenced, 25 years, no parole possibility for 15. Salazar got 20. With the plea deals and cooperating witnesses, the whole network is done. Completely dismantled." Ethan leaned against the counter, processing this. 25 years. It wasn't justice for what they'd done. There was no sentence long enough to balance the lives they'd destroyed, but it was something. It was accountability. What about the victims, the women who were recovered? Most are in witness protection or have been returned to their home countries with support services. Elena, the Romanian girl whose testimony you read, She's actually starting college in the fall, full scholarship, studying social work, says she wants to help other survivors. From destruction to purpose. From victim to advocate. It was the kind of transformation that made all the difficult choices worthwhile. That's good, really good. There's something else. The Attorney General's office wants to recognize your contribution. They're talking about some kind of civilian commendation ceremony. Figured you'd want to shut that down before it gets too far. Ethan smiled. Mike knew him well. Yeah, definitely shut that down. I don't need recognition. This was never about that. I know, but Ward, you should let yourself feel good about what you accomplished. You saved lives. You stopped genuinely evil people. You made a difference. That matters. After they hung up, Ethan stood in his kitchen thinking about difference and meaning and the unexpected paths life could take. 6 months ago, he'd been a single father trying to live quietly, trying to leave his past behind. Then one moment of choice, one decision to intervene, had pulled him back into a world he thought he'd left forever. But it hadn't destroyed him. It hadn't cost him his relationship with Maya. Instead, it had forced him to find a way to integrate all the parts of himself. The operator, the father, the protector, the teacher. Not compartmentalized or separated, but whole. "Daddy, I need help with a question," Maya called from the living room. "Coming, baby." He found her at the coffee table, surrounded by papers and markers, working on her project with intense focus. "What's the question?" It asks what makes someone a hero, not just what they do, but what makes them that way inside. She looked up at him with those earnest eyes. "What do you think?" Ethan sat down beside her, considering the question carefully. "I think heroes are just regular people who decide that someone else's safety matters more than their own comfort. They see something wrong, and instead of looking away, they do something about it, even when it's scary, even when it costs them something." Plus, Maya wrote this down carefully in her neat third-grade handwriting. "Were you scared when you helped that lady?" He could lie, could tell her he wasn't scared because he was trained and prepared. But she deserved the truth. "Yeah, I was scared. Not of the bad guys. I knew how to handle them. I was scared because you were there. Scared I was making the wrong choice. Scared something would happen to you because of what I did. But you helped her anyway." "I helped her anyway." Why? Such a simple question, such a complicated answer. Ethan thought about all the reasons: training, instinct, moral obligation, inability to walk away. But he settled on the simplest truth. Because she needed help and I could give it. And because I want to live in a world where people help each other, especially when it's hard. I want you to grow up in that kind of world. Maya nodded solemnly, adding this to her notes. Then she surprised him with her next question. "Do you still have nightmares about it?" Ethan's breath caught. He thought he'd hidden the nightmares well. The occasional nights when he woke up in a cold sweat, reliving the raid, the gunfire at Mike's cabin, the moment when Maya's safety hung in the balance. "Sometimes," he admitted. "How did you know?" "I hear you sometimes at night, walking around, checking my room." She said it matter-of-factly, without fear or judgment. "I have nightmares too. About the cabin, about the bad men. But then I remember you came back like you promised, and I can go back to sleep." The simple resilience of children never ceased to amaze him. She'd been through trauma that would haunt adults for years, yet she'd processed it, integrated it, and moved forward. Maybe that was the real lesson here, not that trauma didn't affect us, but that we could choose how to carry it. "We're both going to be okay," Ethan said, pulling her into a hug. "It takes time, but we'll be okay." "I know, Daddy, because we have each other." The weekend came and Ethan devoted Saturday to helping Maya with her project. They went through photos, carefully selected ones that didn't show any violence or danger, and she interviewed him with questions she'd prepared. Her perspective on the events was refreshingly uncomplicated. Bad people were doing bad things. Her daddy stopped them, and now those people couldn't hurt anyone else. She didn't need the tactical details or the moral complexity. She just needed to know that when evil appeared, good people stood against it. On Sunday, Mike came over for a barbecue. He'd become a regular presence in their lives. Uncle Mike, who told funny stories and played soccer in the backyard with Maya and gave Ethan someone to talk to who understood the weight he carried. While Maya was occupied trying to teach Mike's dog to do tricks, Mike and Ethan sat on the patio, beers in hand, watching the afternoon fade toward evening. Heard you turned down 3 consulting requests this week, Mike said. 4, actually, FBI, DEA, and 2 private security firms. Not even tempted? Ethan shook his head. The training program is enough, more than enough. I'm making a real difference without having to leave Maya or put myself in situations where I might not come home. Fair enough. Though I gotta say, watching you teach is almost more impressive than watching you operate. You've got a gift for it. I just tell people what I learned the hard way. Hope they can learn it the easy way instead. Mike was quiet for a moment, then said, You know what's funny? 3 years ago, when you left the teams, I thought you were making a mistake. Thought you were running away from who you were. But now, seeing this, seeing you with Maya, seeing what you've built with the training program, I think you figured out something most of us never do. What's that? How to be a warrior without being at war. How to use all that training and experience to build instead of just destroy. Most guys like us, we either stay in until it destroys us or we get out and spend the rest of our lives feeling useless. You found a third option. Ethan considered this. The third option, not operator, not civilian, but something integrated and sustainable. Something that honored all the parts of who he was. I had good teachers, he said, and a daughter who needed me to figure it out. Maya came running over, breathless and laughing, Mike's dog bounding beside her. Daddy! Uncle Mike! Watch this trick! They watched as she attempted to get the dog to roll over, which worked approximately half the time, but delighted her completely when it did. This was the world worth protecting. Not some abstract concept of freedom or democracy, but this specific child's laughter, this specific moment of joy. Monday morning, Ethan arrived at the training facility to find Admiral Brennan waiting in his office. The Admiral looked older than he had 6 months ago, the weight of command and fatherhood etching deeper lines in his face. Admiral, I wasn't expecting you. I wanted to deliver some news personally. The task force analysis of the trafficking network we dismantled is complete. Your intervention didn't just take down one operation, it cracked open connections to 17 other networks across North America. The coordinated operations based on Constantine's cooperation have resulted in 73 arrests and the recovery of 41 victims. The numbers were staggering. Ethan had known the network was large, but this scope went beyond anything he'd imagined. 41 lives, Brennan continued. 41 women and girls who would still be trapped, brutalized, dehumanized if you hadn't acted in that parking lot 6 months ago. I wanted you to understand the full impact of what you did. Don't say you were just doing the right thing, Brennan interrupted gently. You made a choice that required extraordinary courage. You risked everything for a stranger. Then you risked it again to see the mission through. That's not ordinary. That's exceptional. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that. He'd never been comfortable with praise, especially for actions that still kept him awake some nights questioning if he'd made the right calls. How's Claire? He asked, changing the subject. She's well, thriving actually. The work we did together, dismantling that network, gave her closure she didn't know she needed. She's expanded the anti-trafficking program across the entire Pacific Fleet now. Your training curriculum is being adopted by multiple agencies. That's good. That's really good. Brennan stood, preparing to leave, then paused. My daughter told me something recently that I thought you should hear. She said that before that day in the parking lot, she'd started to lose faith in people. Too many years seeing the worst of humanity, too many victims who weren't saved, too many perpetrators who got away. Then she looked up and saw you, a complete stranger, stepping between her and armed men. She said it restored something in her. The belief that good people still exist. The Admiral's eyes were bright with emotion. You gave me my daughter back. But you gave her something too, her faith in humanity. I'm not sure which gift is more valuable. After Brennan left, Ethan sat alone in his office for a long time, processing everything. 73 arrests, 41 victims recovered, networks dismantled, training programs expanded, lives changed and saved. All because he'd listened to his 7-year-old daughter whisper, "Daddy, please help her." The week continued with its rhythm of training sessions, administrative work, and evenings with Maya. Her Hero Project presentation was scheduled for Friday, and she was both excited and nervous. Ethan helped her practice, gave her tips on public speaking, reminded her that being nervous was normal and even helpful. Friday afternoon, he got permission to attend the presentation. The third grade classroom was decorated with projects about heroes, firefighters, doctors, historical figures, parents, teachers. Maya's was displayed prominently, a poster board covered in carefully drawn pictures and neatly written paragraphs. When it was her turn to present, Maya stood in front of the class with a confidence that made Ethan's heart swell with pride. "My hero is my dad," she began, her voice clear and strong. "His name is Ethan Ward, and he used to be in the Navy where he protected people. One day at a shopping center, he saw bad men trying to hurt a lady. Everyone else just watched, but my dad helped her. He stopped the bad men and saved her life." She went through her presentation, explaining what had happened in simple third-grade terms, talking about courage and doing the right thing even when it's scary. She showed photos of Ethan in his Navy uniform, photos of them together, drawings she'd made of the parking lot scene, rendered in crayon with a stick figure daddy being brave. "The best part about my dad being a hero," Maya concluded, "is that he's also just my dad. He makes me breakfast and helps with homework and comes to all my soccer games. He says heroes are just regular people who help others, so I think everyone can be a hero if they want to be." The class applauded and Maya beamed, finding Ethan in the back of the room. He gave her a thumbs up, not trusting himself to speak past the lump in his throat. After school, driving home, Maya was chattering excitedly about the presentation, about her classmates' reactions, about how her teacher said it was one of the best projects in the class. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Ethan said. "You did an amazing job." "Did you like what I said at the end? About everyone being able to be a hero?" "I loved it, because it's true. Heroism isn't about being special or having superpowers. It's about making good choices when it matters." "That's what you taught me." "When did I teach you that?" "Every day, Daddy. You show me every day." That evening, after Maya was asleep, Ethan stood in his backyard looking at the stars. The same stars that had wheeled overhead on the night of the raids. On the night he'd stood frozen, listening to gunfire at Mike's cabin. On the countless nights since when he'd questioned every choice. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. His hand went automatically to his hip, old reflex, before he recognized the number belonged to Elena, the Romanian victim whose testimony had helped convict Constantine. "Mr. Ward, I hope you don't mind that I got your number from Agent Reeves. I wanted you to know that I was accepted to Arizona State University. I start in the fall studying social work. I want to help others like people helped me. Thank you for giving me a future." Elena Ethan stared at the message, reading it 3 times. This was the real measure of success. Not arrests or convictions or tactical victories, but futures restored, lives reclaimed, hope renewed. He typed back, "Congratulations, Elena. You're going to help so many people. Your courage inspires me. Best of luck at ASU." The stars continued their ancient dance overhead. The city lights of Phoenix glowed on the horizon. Inside the house, his daughter slept safely. 6 months ago, Ethan Ward had stood in a parking lot facing an impossible choice. Every decision since had flowed from that moment. The raids, the danger, the fear, the transformation. He'd saved Claire Brennan's life. Then he'd helped save 41 more. He'd dismantled a network that destroyed lives for profit. He'd built a training program that would multiply his effectiveness far beyond what he could accomplish alone. But more than any of that, he'd figured out how to be whole. How to integrate the warrior and the father, the protector and the teacher, the man who'd been and the man he was becoming. The work wasn't finished. There would be more victims, more traffickers, more darkness to push against. But he'd found a sustainable way to fight, not by returning to the teams, not by abandoning his skills, but by teaching others to carry the torch. And every night, he came home to Maya. Every weekend, they lived their normal life. Every moment, he was present and engaged, the father she deserved. That was the real victory. Not the arrests or the commendations or the lives saved, though all of that mattered. The real victory was finding balance, finding a way to serve both the mission and his daughter, finding peace with being both protector and parent. Ethan walked back inside, checked on Maya one final time, a habit he'd probably never break, and prepared for bed. Tomorrow was Saturday. Maya had a soccer game in the morning, and they were planning to go hiking in the afternoon. Normal, mundane, perfect. As he lay in bed, drifting towards sleep, his last conscious thought was of that moment in the parking lot. Maya's whispered words, "Daddy, please help her." He'd made the choice to help, and in helping a stranger, he'd ultimately helped himself, forced himself to confront who he was and who he wanted to be, to find a path that honored both. The operator had returned, but he'd returned transformed. Not as a weapon pointed at enemies, but as a shield protecting the innocent. Not as someone who lived for the mission, but as someone who made the mission serve life. And that made all the difference. Sleep came peacefully, without nightmares, without doubt. Outside, Phoenix slept too. A little bit safer because one man had chosen to act when others looked away. Because one father had figured out how to be both warrior and dad. Because courage, in the end, was just love with better tactical training. The story that began in a parking lot with a whispered plea had transformed into something larger. A training program. A new purpose. A sustainable way forward. But at its core, it remained simple. A father. A daughter. A choice to protect. And the wisdom to find a way to keep protecting without losing what mattered most. That was enough. That was everything. And as dawn broke over Arizona, Ethan Ward woke to the sound of his daughter singing in the next room, ready for another day of being exactly who he needed to be. Not a hero, not an operator, but simply Maya's dad, who happened to know how to fight the darkness while staying rooted in the light. The end of one chapter. The beginning of the rest of his life. And it was good.